poor mother sells her only daughter for $10,000 to marry an Arab sheik. Years later, a luxury car stops in front of her house, and she can't believe what she sees. The persistent drip from the kitchen faucet marked time like a metronome, each drop hitting the stained porcelain with a hollow ping that echoed through the cramped apartment. Eleanor Wilson pressed her fingertips against her temples, willing away the headache that had taken up permanent residence behind her eyes. The stack of bills on the table before her hadn't diminished despite her staring at them for the past hour. If anything, they seemed to have multiplied, spreading across the scratched wooden surface like an invasive species. Outside, Detroit's winter had settled in with vindictive determination. Frost patterns decorated the poorly insulated windows, beautiful in their crystalline intricacy, but a stark reminder of the heating bill she couldn't afford to pay. Eleanor pulled her threadbare cardigan tighter around her thin frame, her fingers tracing the outline of the prescription bottle in her pocket. 2 pills left, the ones that kept the pain at bay enough for her to work her shift at the diner. The ones that cost nearly a day's wages to refill. "Mom, did you eat anything?" Eleanor looked up to see her 13-year-old daughter standing in the doorway, concern etched across a face too young for such worry. Olivia's dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her second-hand clothes nearly arranged, everything about her neat and orderly in defiance of their chaotic circumstances. Eleanor forced a smile, pushing away the medical bills to make room for the textbook Olivia carried. "I had a sandwich earlier," Eleanor lied, the emptiness in her stomach contradicting her words. "How was the library?" Olivia's face brightened, her eyes, so like her father's that it sometimes hurt Eleanor to look at them, sparkling with enthusiasm. "Amazing. Mrs. Patel let me borrow this advanced French grammar book even though it's normally for college students." She placed the heavy tome on the table, her slender fingers reverently tracing its cover. "And I finished that online coding module I told you about. The instructor said my solution was elegant." She pronounced the word carefully, savoring it. "That means efficient and beautiful at the same time." Eleanor's smile softened into something genuine. "Just like you, smarty pants." Olivia rolled her eyes, but a pleased flush colored her cheeks. At 13, she existed in that precarious space between childhood and adolescence, still young enough to crave her mother's approval, but increasingly aware of the adult world's harsh realities. Eleanor watched as her daughter settled at the table, automatically arranging her notebooks with the precision that characterized everything she did. "Have you heard back from Dr. Lancaster about the clinical trial?" Olivia asked without looking up, her tone deliberately casual in a way that broke Eleanor's heart. Children shouldn't know their mother's oncologist by name. They shouldn't understand terms like aggressive lymphoma or experimental treatment protocol. Eleanor swallowed hard. "Not yet, but you know how busy he is." The truth was Dr. Lancaster had called that morning. The news wasn't good. The latest blood work showed the cancer was advancing despite the standard treatments. The experimental protocol was her best hope, possibly her only hope, but insurance wouldn't cover it. $40,000. Might as well be 40 million for all the chance she had of raising it. "I made some pasta," Olivia said, changing the subject with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to navigating difficult conversations. "There's enough for both of us. And Mrs. Guzman from 3B gave me some of her homemade sauce when I helped her carry her groceries up the stairs." Eleanor felt the familiar mixture of pride and shame wash over her. Pride in the compassionate, resourceful young woman her daughter was becoming. Shame that at 13, Olivia was effectively managing their household, stretching their meager resources, and caring for her sick mother when it should have been the other way around. "That sounds wonderful," Eleanor said, gathering the bills into a haphazard pile and shoving them into a drawer, out of sight if never truly out of mind. "Tell me more about this coding thing you're doing." As Olivia launched into an explanation filled with terms Eleanor barely understood, algorithms and functions and something called Python that had nothing to do with snakes, Eleanor studied her daughter's animated face. Olivia had always been extraordinary. Walking early, talking in complete sentences before her second birthday, reading voraciously by 4. The local public school had quickly proven inadequate for her accelerated mind, but private school scholarships and gifted programs required resources they didn't have: transportation, supplies, time for Eleanor to shuttle her between enrichment activities. So Olivia had created her own education, piecing it together from library books, free online courses, and the occasional kindness of teachers who recognized her exceptional potential. By 12, she spoke fluent Spanish picked up from their neighbors and conversational French, learned from YouTube videos and borrowed textbooks. Mathematics came to her as naturally as breathing, numbers and patterns revealing themselves to her in ways that seemed almost magical to Eleanor. And if I can master this next section, I might qualify for the coding competition at Wayne State next month, Olivia was saying, her fork gesturing enthusiastically. First prize is $500 and a summer internship. Eleanor nodded encouragingly, though her stomach clenched at the mention of the competition. They couldn't afford the registration fee, minimal as it might be. Another opportunity Olivia would miss because of their circumstances. Another door closed before she could even approach it. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Olivia's expression faltered slightly, her perceptiveness catching the hesitation in Eleanor's voice. It's only $20 to register, she said quickly. I can use the money I've been saving from helping Mrs. Patel organize the library's filing system. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. Olivia's savings were kept in a chipped ceramic unicorn bank on her dresser, singles and fives earned from odd jobs around the neighborhood. Money that should have gone toward teenage indulgences, movie tickets or cute clothes or whatever 13-year-old girls coveted these days. Instead, it went to bus fare to get to the library across town or printing costs for school assignments or, increasingly often, groceries when Eleanor's paycheck stretched too thin. We'll figure it out, Eleanor promised, reaching across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. Olivia's fingers were long and elegant, a pianist's hands though they'd never had the luxury of lessons, with nails bitten to the quick, her only visible sign of stress. They ate in companionable silence, the pasta slightly overcooked but warmed by Mrs. Guzman's rich tomato sauce. Eleanor managed a few bites, mostly pushing the food around her plate while ensuring Olivia ate her fill. The persistent fatigue and nausea from her last round of chemotherapy made eating a chore rather than a pleasure. After dinner, Olivia insisted on washing the dishes while Eleanor rested on their sagging couch, a relic from a second-hand store that smelled perpetually of mothballs despite multiple cleanings. Through half-closed eyes, Eleanor watched her daughter move efficiently around their tiny kitchen. The gentle domestic sounds a counterpoint to the constant worry that had become the soundtrack of their lives. Later, once Olivia had retreated to the bedroom they shared to complete her homework, Eleanor retrieved the bills from the drawer. The largest one, a hospital statement emblazoned with "Final Notice" in aggressive red letters, seemed to pulsate in her hands. $3,000 for the last round of treatment. The rent was 2 months overdue. The electric company had sent a disconnection warning. And now, looming over everything like a shadow, was the $40,000 needed for the experimental treatment that represented her best chance at seeing Olivia grow up. Eleanor pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting back tears that would solve nothing. She needed solutions, not self-pity. But every avenue she'd explored had led to a dead end. Their small circle of friends and acquaintances were as financially strapped as they were. Loans were impossible with her credit history. Crowdfunding campaigns required networks they didn't have. She'd even swallowed her pride and contacted Olivia's father, though she'd known it was futile. His response had been predictable silence, the same answer he'd given to every responsibility throughout their brief marriage. A sharp knock at the door startled Eleanor from her desperate calculations. She glanced at the microwave clock. 9:42 p.m. Too late for a social call. Too early for trouble from the neighborhood. Probably Mr. Diaz, their landlord, coming to press for the overdue rent in person. "I'll get it," Olivia called, emerging from the bedroom with a pencil tucked behind her ear. "No," Eleanor said quickly, pushing herself up from the couch with an effort that left her momentarily lightheaded. "Finish your homework. It's probably just Mr. Diaz." Olivia hesitated, her expression suggesting she knew exactly what Mr. Diaz's visit would entail. Threats of eviction, perhaps actual eviction papers this time. I can talk to him, she offered. I'll explain about your treatment and… Olivia, Eleanor said firmly. Homework. Now. With a reluctant nod, Olivia disappeared back into the bedroom, though Eleanor noticed she left the door ajar. Smoothing her hair and straightening her cardigan in a futile attempt at dignity, Eleanor opened the front door, prepared for Mr. Diaz's perpetually disapproving scowl. Instead, she found herself facing a tall, well-dressed stranger. His charcoal suit looked expensive, the fabric draping perfectly over his broad shoulders. His shoes gleamed with a polish that spoke of careful maintenance. Everything about him seemed out of place in their rundown apartment building, like a character who had wandered in from another movie set. "Mrs. Wilson?" he inquired, his voice carrying the refined edges of an expensive education. "Eleanor Wilson?" Eleanor nodded cautiously, one hand still gripping the doorknob, ready to slam it shut if necessary. Years of living in one of Detroit's less desirable neighborhoods had taught her wariness of unexpected visitors, especially those who looked prosperous enough to have business elsewhere. "My name is Richard Harmon," the man continued, offering a business card that Eleanor accepted automatically. "I represent a client who has a proposition that might be of significant benefit to you and your daughter." Eleanor glanced at the card. It was heavy stock, cream-colored with embossed black lettering. Richard Harmon, International Liaison, followed by a phone number with an unfamiliar country code. No company name, no address. "I'm not interested in buying anything," Eleanor said, moving to close the door. Harmon's polished shoe smoothly inserted itself into the gap. "I'm not selling anything, Mrs. Wilson. My client is Sheikh Khalid Al-Nazari of Dubai. He's aware of your situation and believes he can offer assistance that would be mutually beneficial." Eleanor's hand tightened on the doorknob. "How does someone from Dubai know anything about my situation?" A smile ghosted across Harmon's face. "Sheikh Al-Nazari has extensive business interests in medical research. Your oncologist, Dr. Lancaster, heads a research program partially funded by the Sheikh's Foundation. Your case was brought to his attention as one that might benefit from the experimental protocol being developed." Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty hallway. The idea that her medical information had been shared with a stranger, regardless of his financial contributions, felt invasive. Yet beneath her indignation flickered a dangerous spark of hope. If this man represented someone with connections to the experimental treatment, perhaps we could discuss this inside? Harmon suggested, glancing meaningfully at the open doors along the hallway, where curious neighbors were undoubtedly listening. Against her better judgment, Eleanor stepped back, allowing him into their small living room. She remained standing, arms crossed defensively across her chest, unwilling to offer the courtesy of seating to this unexpected intruder. Harmon didn't seem bothered by the lack of hospitality. His gaze swept the apartment, taking in the water stains on the ceiling, the mismatched furniture, the general shabbiness that no amount of cleaning could disguise. There was no judgment in his expression, merely clinical assessment. "I'll be direct, Mrs. Wilson. Sheikh Al-Nazari and his wife Amira have been unable to have children of their own. The Sheikh's wife has expressed a desire to adopt a daughter, specifically an American girl with certain qualities." Something cold settled in the pit of Eleanor's stomach. What kind of qualities? Intelligence, adaptability, youth. Harmon's gaze shifted to the bedroom door, where Olivia undoubtedly listened while pretending not to. "Your daughter's academic achievements have not gone unnoticed, despite the limitations of her circumstances. Her linguistic abilities are particularly impressive." Eleanor took a step backward, her knees bumping against the couch. "How do you know about Olivia's academics?" Harmon smiled again, a practiced expression that never reached his eyes. "As I mentioned, the Sheikh has extensive resources. When Dr. Lancaster mentioned your case, including your financial constraints due to being a single mother, my employer became interested in learning more about your family situation. Your daughter's school records are, after all, a matter of public record. The implication that this stranger representing a foreign billionaire, had been investigating her daughter sent alarm bells clanging through Eleanor's head. "I think you should leave. Before you make that decision, Mrs. Wilson, I suggest you hear the full proposition." Harmon reached into his suit jacket and withdrew an envelope. "Sheikh Al-Nazari is prepared to offer you $10,000 in exchange for legal guardianship of Olivia until she reaches the age of 21. The world seemed to tilt beneath Eleanor's feet. "You want to buy my daughter?" "I prefer to think of it as an arrangement that benefits all parties," Harmon corrected smoothly. "The sheik and his wife gain a daughter they can provide every advantage to. Olivia receives an education and opportunities beyond anything you could offer her. And you receive funds that could cover your medical treatment, allowing you to recover and eventually reunite with your daughter once she reaches adulthood." Eleanor sank onto the couch, her legs no longer able to support her. The proposition was so outrageous, so grotesque, that she couldn't formulate a coherent response. Sell her daughter to strangers? Send Olivia halfway around the world to live among people they'd never met? The very suggestion was obscene. Yet even as revulsion rose in her throat, the desperate part of her brain, the part that lay awake calculating how many months she had left if the cancer continued progressing at its current rate, whispered treacherous calculations. $10,000 would cover the immediate medical bills and buy time to qualify for the clinical trial. If she survived, she could find a way to get Olivia back. If she didn't, wasn't it better for Olivia to have wealthy guardians than to end up in the foster system? No. The word escaped Eleanor's lips with quiet force. Absolutely not. Harmon seemed unsurprised by her rejection. He placed the envelope on the coffee table, alongside a glossy brochure. "This contains information about Sheikh Al-Nazari's family, their compound in Dubai, and the international school Olivia would attend. I encourage you to review it once you've had time to consider the offer more carefully." "There's nothing to consider," Eleanor insisted, though her eyes betrayed her by darting to the envelope. "I would never send my daughter away, especially not to strangers." "Of course," Harmon acknowledged, his tone suggesting he'd heard similar initial rejections before. "However, circumstances can clarify one's priorities. The Sheikh's offer will remain open for 1 week." He withdrew a sleek smartphone from his pocket and tapped at the screen. "Perhaps this will help you understand the opportunity better." He turned the phone toward Eleanor. On the screen was a video call showing an elegantly appointed room where a woman in stylish but modest clothing sat on a cream-colored sofa. Her features were delicate, her dark eyes kind beneath perfectly shaped brows. "Mrs. Wilson," the woman said, her accented English flowing like silk, "I am Amira Al-Nazari. I understand your concerns about our proposal, but please know we would cherish your daughter and provide her with every opportunity to develop her exceptional gifts." Eleanor stared at the woman, whose gentle smile and soft voice presented such a contrast to Harmon's businesslike demeanor. There was something in Amira's eyes, a longing, a sadness, that resonated with Eleanor's own pain. "Why?" Eleanor asked, the question encompassing more than she could articulate. "Why Olivia? Why this proposal? Why now?" Amira's smile faltered slightly. "I cannot have children of my own. This has been a great sorrow in my life. When my husband learned of your situation, a mother facing serious illness, a brilliantly gifted daughter with limited opportunities, he saw a way to bring joy to our home while helping a family in need." The calculated precision of this answer, its perfect targeting of Eleanor's deepest fears and hopes, sent a chill through her. Before she could respond, the bedroom door opened fully, and Olivia stepped into the living room. "I'm not going anywhere," she announced, her young voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "And my mother isn't dying." Harmon turned to regard Olivia with interest, like a jeweler assessing a particularly fine specimen. "Miss Wilson, your reputation for directness is well-founded." Olivia lifted her chin, moving to stand beside Eleanor on the couch. "You've been investigating me." "Researching," Harmon corrected. "Sheikh Al-Nazari is very thorough in his philanthropic efforts." "This isn't philanthropy," Olivia countered. "You're trying to buy me." From the phone screen, Amira made a soft sound of distress. "No, dear one. We wish to welcome you into our family. to provide you with the education your brilliant mind deserves, to give your mother peace knowing you are well cared for while she focuses on her recovery. Eleanor wrapped an arm around Olivia's shoulders, drawing her daughter close. The girl was trembling slightly, though whether from fear or anger was difficult to discern. "Thank you for your offer," Eleanor said firmly. "But as you can see, we're doing just fine on our own." Harmon's gaze dropped pointedly to the stack of medical bills visible in the open drawer. "Of course. However, should you reconsider, my card has my contact information." He ended the video call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "I'll see myself out." Eleanor remained seated, holding Olivia tightly against her side as Harmon made his way to the door. His hand on the knob, he paused, looking back at them with an expression that might have been compassion on a less calculating face. "Mrs. Wilson, I understand your reaction. Any good mother would respond similarly. But I encourage you to consider what's truly best for Olivia's future. Sheikh Al-Nazari can offer her a world of opportunities. The finest schools, travel, cultural experiences, connections to global leaders. And for you." He glanced meaningfully at Eleanor's too-thin frame, the dark circles beneath her eyes, the prescription bottle visible on the kitchen counter. "The treatment you need to survive." The door closed behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the apartment. Eleanor and Olivia remained frozen on the couch, the glossy brochure and envelope on the coffee table like artifacts from another reality. One where mothers considered selling their children, and where oil-rich sheiks shopped for American teenagers. "You're not even thinking about it, right?" Olivia finally asked, her voice small and uncertain in a way that made her sound much younger than 13. Eleanor squeezed her daughter's shoulders. "Of course not, sweetheart. That man was—" She trailed off, unable to find a word that encompassed the disturbing wrongness of Harmon's proposition. Olivia pulled away slightly, her eyes, too perceptive, too adult, searching Eleanor's face. "But the money would pay for your treatment." "There are some things money can't buy," Eleanor said firmly, pushing the envelope farther away across the coffee table. "You're not for sale at any price." Olivia's shoulders relaxed slightly, though worry still creased her forehead. "What if—" she began, then stopped, chewing her lower lip. "What if what, Liv? What if I get sick?" Olivia whispered. "We can barely afford your medicine. What happens when I need something? Or when the electricity gets shut off? Or when Mr. Diaz finally kicks us out?" The practical worries, voiced in her daughter's trembling voice, cut Eleanor more deeply than any of Harmon's calculated observations. These were the questions she asked herself every night as she stared at the ceiling, exhaustion pulling at her limbs while anxiety kept her mind racing. "We'll figure it out," Eleanor insisted, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. "We always do." Olivia said nothing, but her skeptical expression spoke volumes. At 13, she was already too familiar with the harsh mathematics of poverty, the calculations that determined whether medicine or food took priority in a given week, the constant subtractions from an already insufficient sum. "Let's forget about that man and his ridiculous offer," Eleanor said, rising from the couch with forced energy. She gathered the envelope and brochure, intending to throw them in the trash, but hesitated. Something in her couldn't quite let go of them. Instead, she tucked them into the drawer with the bills, out of sight but not completely discarded. "It's getting late. You should be in bed. Will you be okay?" Olivia asked, the role reversal breaking Eleanor's heart anew. A child shouldn't have to worry about her parents' well-being. "I'll be fine," Eleanor assured her, managing a smile that felt brittle around the edges. "Just a little tired from all the excitement." Olivia nodded, though disbelief shadowed her eyes. "Good night, Mom," she said, wrapping her arms around Eleanor's waist in a fierce hug. "I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in this world." After Olivia had retreated to their shared bedroom, Eleanor sank back onto the couch, her body heavy with exhaustion and the emotional aftermath of Harmon's visit. She should call the police, report him for what? No explicit threat had been made. No laws had been broken, at least none she could articulate. And deep in the most desperate corner of her heart, a treacherous voice whispered that she should at least read the materials he'd left. The persistent drip from the kitchen faucet continued its maddening rhythm. Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of impossible choices settling over her. In the quiet apartment, with her daughter safely asleep in the next room, she allowed herself to acknowledge the truth she'd been avoiding since Dr. Lancaster's call that morning. Without the experimental treatment, she was dying. And if she died, what would happen to Olivia? The answer haunted her as she finally dragged herself to bed, sliding carefully beside her sleeping daughter. Foster care, probably. Their nearest relative was Eleanor's sister in California, who had made it clear years ago that she had neither the resources nor the inclination to take on the responsibility of raising her niece. Eleanor lay awake long into the night, listening to Olivia's even breathing, memorizing the curve of her profile in the dim light filtering through the thin curtains. $10,000. A fortune beyond their reach under normal circumstances. A pittance for the life of her child. I would never, she whispered into the darkness. Never. But even as the words left her lips, Eleanor felt the insidious seed of doubt taking root. Not today, not tomorrow. But if the cancer progressed, if the pain became unbearable, if the choice became not between keeping Olivia or sending her away, but between giving Olivia a chance at a future or leaving her alone in an indifferent world, the dripping faucet counted the seconds, each tiny splash a reminder of time slipping away, of decisions deferred but never truly escaped. The following days passed in a fog of normalcy that felt increasingly surreal to Eleanor. She went to her shifts at the diner, serving greasy breakfasts to truckers and businessmen with practiced efficiency that belied her constant fatigue. She attended a brief appointment with Dr. Lancaster, who repeated his grim prognosis with clinical detachment, seemingly unaware or unconcerned that his patient information had somehow reached a foreign businessman. Olivia continued her studies, throwing herself into her schoolwork and independent projects with even greater intensity than usual, as if academic excellence might somehow shield them from the precariousness of their situation. Neither of them mentioned Harmon's visit or the materials still hidden in the drawer with the unpaid bills. But the specter of the offer haunted their small apartment, an invisible presence that altered the air between them. Eleanor caught Olivia watching her with worried eyes when she thought herself unobserved. She noticed how her daughter winced each time Eleanor's hand trembled while pouring coffee, or how she flinched at the sound of Eleanor's increasingly frequent coughing fits. 5 days after Harmon's visit, their fragile pretense of normality shattered. Eleanor collapsed during her shift at the diner, a searing pain in her abdomen dropping her to the grimy linoleum floor between the counter and the grill. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was barely conscious, aware only of the concerned faces of her coworkers and the manager's harried voice saying, "Someone call her kid." The hospital room came into focus slowly, the antiseptic smell and mechanical beeping familiar companions from previous stays. Eleanor blinked against the harsh fluorescent lighting, her mouth dry and tasting of chemicals. A slight pressure on her hand drew her attention to the side of the bed, where Olivia sat clutching her fingers, dark smudges beneath her eyes suggesting she'd been there for some time. "Hey, smarty pants," Eleanor whispered, her voice rough. Olivia's head snapped up, relief washing over her tired face. "Mom, you're awake. I need to get the nurse." She half rose, reluctant to release Eleanor's hand. "Wait," Eleanor murmured. "How long was I out?" "Almost 2 days," Olivia said, her lower lip trembling slightly. They said the cancer has spread to your liver. That's why you collapsed." The clinical explanation delivered in her daughter's young voice struck Eleanor like a physical blow. Before she could respond, the door opened, and Dr. Lancaster entered, his white coat pristine, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Wilson, good to see you conscious," he said, checking the monitors beside her bed. "You gave everyone quite a scare." Eleanor's gaze remained fixed on Olivia. "Could my daughter wait outside while we talk?" "No," Olivia said firmly, her hand tightening around Eleanor's. "I need to hear everything. I'm not a child." "But you are," Eleanor thought with a pang. You're 13 years old and shouldn't know words like metastasized or palliative care. You should be worrying about school dances and friendship bracelets, not your mother's liver function. Dr. Lancaster seemed to sense the tension between them. Perhaps a compromise, he suggested. I'll give you the general update now with Olivia present, and we can discuss treatment options in more detail later. Eleanor nodded reluctantly, and the doctor continued, his tone modulating to something gentler than his usual clinical efficiency. The cancer has progressed more rapidly than we anticipated. The tumors have metastasized to your liver, which is what caused your collapse. We've stabilized you for now, but... He hesitated, glancing at Olivia's rigid posture. The standard treatments are no longer effective. We need to consider more aggressive approaches. The experimental protocol, Eleanor said, the words barely audible. Dr. Lancaster nodded. It would be my recommendation at this stage. However, as we've discussed, insurance won't cover experimental treatments. The out-of-pocket costs. We know how much it costs, Olivia interrupted, her voice sharp with a maturity beyond her years. $40,000 that we don't have. What's plan B? The doctor's expression softened with compassion that made Eleanor's stomach clench. There was no plan B. They all knew it. We can continue palliative care, he said gently. Manage the symptoms, make you comfortable. While I die, Eleanor finished flatly. Olivia made a small, wounded sound, and Eleanor immediately regretted her bluntness. Dr. Lancaster's expression confirmed what she'd said, however. Without the experimental treatment, it was no longer a question of if but when. I'd like to speak with my daughter alone, please, Eleanor said. The doctor nodded, making a few notes in her chart before quietly exiting the room. In the sudden silence, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor seemed unnaturally loud. Olivia stared at their joined hands, her slender fingers white-knuckled around Eleanor's. We need to call him, she said without looking up. Who? That man. Harmon. We need to call him and accept the sheik's offer. Eleanor felt as though she'd been plunged into ice water. No, absolutely not. We've been through this. No, we haven't. Olivia's head snapped up, eyes blazing with a fierce determination that reminded Eleanor painfully of herself at that age. We've been pretending the offer doesn't exist. But it does, and it's our only option. It's not an option at all, Eleanor insisted, trying to sit up and wincing as pain lanced through her abdomen. I would never send you away, especially not to strangers in a foreign country. And I'm not going to watch you die when there's a way to prevent it. Olivia's voice cracked, tears spilling onto her cheeks. $10,000. That's enough for the initial treatment, enough to buy time to figure out the rest. Eleanor shook her head, ignoring the dizziness the movement provoked. The cost is too high, Olivia. I won't sell my daughter, not for any price. You're not selling me, Olivia said, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. You're saving yourself, and giving me opportunities we both know I'll never have otherwise. She gestured around the sterile hospital room, her expression hardening. Look at our life, Mom. Really look at it. I'm 13 and I've never been outside of Michigan. I'm teaching myself calculus from library books because my school doesn't offer advanced math. I have to hide my test scores so the other kids don't call me a freak. The brutal assessment of their limited circumstances hit Eleanor like physical blows. She tried so hard to give Olivia a good life, to shield her from the harshest realities of their poverty. To hear her daughter's clear-eyed evaluation of what they both knew to be true was devastating. The sheik can give me everything you've ever wanted for me, Olivia continued relentlessly. The best schools, travel, a future where I'm not always scrambling to stay one step ahead of disaster. And you get to live. Her voice broke on the last word. Please, Mom, please let me do this for us. Eleanor closed her eyes against her daughter's pleading expression, against the terrible logic of her argument. The familiar refrain echoed in her mind. A good mother would never send her child away. A good mother would never accept money in exchange for her daughter. A good mother would never, but a good mother would also do anything to stay alive for her child. A good mother would want her daughter to have every opportunity, every advantage. A good mother would sacrifice her own happiness, her own need to keep her child close, if it meant giving that child a better future. Olivia, she began, not knowing how to continue. The words she should say, the firm refusal, the maternal protection, stuck in her throat, blocked by the reality of their desperate circumstances. I already called him, Olivia said quietly. Eleanor's eyes flew open. What? I found his card in the drawer. I called him yesterday while you were unconscious. He's coming to the hospital this afternoon with the paperwork. The betrayal, born of love though it was, left Eleanor speechless. Her 13-year-old daughter had taken matters into her own hands, making the decision Eleanor couldn't bring herself to make. Olivia, you can't. I can, Olivia interrupted, a fierce determination in her young face. And I did. I won't let you die when there's a way to prevent it. I won't. Eleanor stared at her daughter, seeing not just the child she'd raised but glimpses of the woman she would become. Stubborn, intelligent, practical to the point of ruthlessness when necessary. So like herself that it hurt. It's just until I'm 21, Olivia continued, her tone softening. 8 years, and you'll get better and then maybe you can visit. Or I can visit during school breaks. And when I'm an adult, I'll come home. Her voice wavered slightly. It's not forever. The heart monitor betrayed Eleanor's distress, its steady beeping accelerating as her pulse raced. 8 years. 8 years of her daughter's life. The transition from child to woman, spent among strangers in a foreign country. 8 years of birthdays and Christmases and first dances and heartbreaks that Eleanor would miss, if Olivia was allowed to experience them at all in her new home. Yet the alternative loomed even darker. Without treatment, Dr. Lancaster had implied she had months, not years. Months of increasing pain and debilitation, of watching Olivia shoulder more and more responsibility until the inevitable end. And then what? Foster care for Olivia at best. At worst, the streets that had claimed so many other bright, promising young people in their neighborhood. I need to think, Eleanor said finally, her voice barely audible above the medical equipment's mechanical hum. I need time to consider all of this. Olivia's expression softened with relief. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't the categorical refusal of before either. Okay, she agreed. But Harmon is still coming this afternoon. Just to talk, she added quickly, seeing Eleanor's alarm. No decisions today. Eleanor nodded, though the thought of facing the smooth-talking intermediary from her hospital bed, weakened by illness and medications, filled her with dread. She needed to be strong for this conversation, clear-headed enough to see through whatever manipulations he might attempt. Help me sit up, Eleanor said, struggling against the weakness in her limbs. And find me some water, please. Olivia immediately adjusted the hospital bed and offered a plastic cup with a straw. As Eleanor sipped the tepid water, she studied her daughter's face. The determination in her jaw, the fear behind her eyes, the premature lines of worry across her forehead. When had her little girl grown so old? What exactly did Harmon say when you called him? Eleanor asked once her throat felt less parched. Olivia sat back in the chair beside the bed, her posture straight and composed like a much older person preparing to deliver a business report. He said he was glad to hear from me and that the Sheikh's offer still stands. He asked about your condition, and I told him what the doctors said. She hesitated briefly. He seemed to already know some details about your hospitalization. A chill ran through Eleanor that had nothing to do with the hospital's aggressive air conditioning. The idea that Harmon had been monitoring her medical situation added another disturbing layer to an already unsettling proposition. What else? He explained that if we accept, the money would be transferred immediately, enough for your initial treatment. The legal guardianship would be temporary, until I'm 21, and includes provisions for my education and welfare. Olivia's voice took on a practiced quality, as if reciting terms she'd memorized. I would live primarily in Dubai but could potentially visit during school holidays once I've adjusted. Communication would be allowed but supervised at first. Eleanor closed her eyes, trying to process the clinical way her daughter discussed her own future, as if she were a commodity to be transferred rather than a child whose life would be irrevocably altered. "And you're willing to do this?" she asked softly. "To leave everything you know, your school, your friends, your home, to live with strangers halfway around the world? What friends, Mom?" Olivia's question held no self-pity, just honest assessment. "The kids at school think I'm weird because I read college textbooks for fun. Mrs. Patel at the library is nice, but she's not exactly hanging out with me on weekends." She shrugged, the gesture too old for her 13 years. "And as for home, we both know Mr. Diaz is going to evict us as soon as he legally can. The deposit on a new apartment would take every cent we have and then some." The brutal practicality of Olivia's assessment left Eleanor speechless. She had tried so hard to create a stable home for her daughter despite their financial struggles, but Olivia's clear-eyed view of their precarious situation revealed how thin that illusion had always been. "Besides," Olivia continued, her voice softening, "none of it matters if you're not here. You're my home, Mom, and I need you to live." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes, spilling over despite her efforts to contain them. The selflessness in her daughter's declaration, her willingness to sacrifice her own comfort and security for Eleanor's survival, was both beautiful and terrible to witness. "Sweetheart," Eleanor began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. How could she possibly respond to such love? How could she accept such a sacrifice from her child? Yet how could she refuse when the alternative might leave Olivia truly alone in the world? A gentle knock at the door interrupted their conversation. A nurse entered, checking Eleanor's vitals with professional efficiency before administering another dose of pain medication through the foreline. "You have a visitor," the nurse informed them as she finished her tasks. "A Mr. Harmon? He says he has an appointment." Eleanor shot a glance at Olivia, who had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I didn't think he'd come so soon," she murmured. "Should I send him in?" the nurse asked, looking between them with mild curiosity. Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This conversation, whatever its outcome, would alter the course of their lives irrevocably. She needed to be clear-headed, to advocate for Olivia's best interests against a man who surely had his own agenda. But the pain medication was already beginning to take effect, softening the edges of her thoughts, dulling the sharp clarity she needed. She glanced at the nurse's name tag, Linda, and made a quick decision. "Linda, could you please tell Mr. Harmon I need 30 minutes before I can see him? I need a moment with my daughter." The nurse nodded and left to deliver the message. As soon as the door closed, Eleanor turned to Olivia with renewed urgency. "Listen to me carefully. If we consider this arrangement, we need guarantees. Real, legal guarantees, not just promises from a smooth-talking middleman." Her mind raced, gathering the scattered threads of protection she could think to demand. Written communication allowed at least weekly. Video calls monthly. Visits after the first year. Your education must be at an accredited international school with appropriate credentials for college. Olivia's expression brightened slightly, hope kindling in her eyes as she realized her mother was at least contemplating the possibility rather than rejecting it outright. "And most importantly," Eleanor continued, her voice strengthening despite her physical weakness, "an exit clause. If at any point you're unhappy or feel unsafe, there needs to be a way for you to come home immediately, no questions asked." "I can ask for all that," Olivia agreed eagerly. "Harmon said the agreement can be customized to address our concerns." Eleanor reached for her daughter's hand, gripping it with what strength she could muster. "Olivia, I need you to understand something. If we do this, if I agree to this impossible thing, it's not because I want to send you away. It's not because I don't want you with me every day. It would be the hardest thing I've ever done." "I know, Mom." Olivia's voice quavered slightly. "I know you don't want to send me away, but sometimes the hardest choice is the right one." The mature insight from her 13-year-old daughter nearly broke Eleanor's resolve. How had this child become so wise, so pragmatic, so willing to sacrifice? The answer, of course, was painful but clear. Necessity had forced Olivia to grow up too quickly, to understand adult compromises and calculations long before she should have needed to. 30 minutes, Eleanor said finally. In 30 minutes, we'll talk to Harmon together. Not to agree, not yet, but to understand exactly what this arrangement would mean. To ask our questions and state our conditions. She squeezed Olivia's hand. And if at any point I think this isn't right, if anything feels wrong or dangerous, we walk away. Promise me you'll accept that. Olivia nodded solemnly. I promise. They sat in silence for the remainder of their reprieve, hands clasped tightly, each lost in private thoughts. Eleanor found herself mentally cataloging her daughter's features, the slight arch of her eyebrows, the constellation of freckles across her nose that appeared each summer, the determined set of her jaw that Eleanor recognized from her own reflection. Memorizing her child, though she refused to acknowledge why. When the door opened again, Richard Harmon entered with the same polished confidence he'd displayed in their apartment. If the hospital setting disturbed his equilibrium at all, he showed no sign of it. He carried a sleek leather portfolio and was accompanied by a woman Eleanor didn't recognize. Middle Eastern in appearance, elegantly dressed in a modest pantsuit, her dark hair pulled back in a simple chignon. Mrs. Wilson, Harmon greeted her with practiced sympathy. I'm sorry to see you under these circumstances. This is Dr. Layla Malik, Sheikh Al-Nazari's sister and personal physician. She's here to answer any medical questions you might have, and to provide a female perspective on the household Olivia would be joining. Dr. Malik stepped forward, her handshake firm and professional. Mrs. Wilson, I understand this is an extraordinarily difficult situation. I'm here to provide any information that might help you and Olivia make an informed decision. There was something in the woman's direct gaze and straightforward manner that Eleanor found marginally reassuring. Unlike Harmon's practiced charm, Dr. Malik projected genuine competence and honesty. Please sit down, Eleanor said, gesturing to the chairs on either side of her bed. The medication had fully taken effect now, dulling the physical pain while leaving her mind in a state of detached clarity that felt almost surreal. Let's talk about exactly what you're proposing. For the next hour, they discussed the details of an arrangement so extraordinary that Eleanor felt as though she were negotiating in a dream. Harmon presented documents outlining the terms. Legal guardianship transferred to Sheikh Khalid and his wife Amira until Olivia's 21st birthday, with provisions for her education, healthcare, cultural and religious autonomy, and communication with Eleanor. Dr. Malik explained the household Olivia would be joining, the Sheikh's 3 wives, each with her own wing of the family compound. The staff of housekeepers, tutors, and security personnel, the daily routines and expectations. She spoke candidly about the cultural adjustments Olivia would face but emphasized the family's cosmopolitan outlook and commitment to education. Throughout the discussion, Eleanor watched Olivia's reactions carefully. Her daughter listened with intense focus, asking astute questions about her schooling, the legal enforcement of the agreement's terms, and the specific expectations for her role in the household. Not once did she show fear or hesitation, though Eleanor could sense the tension in her rigid posture. When the conversation turned to Eleanor's medical treatment, Harmon revealed that arrangements had already been made with Dr. Lancaster. The Sheikh has connections with the research program, he explained. Should you accept our proposal, your enrollment in the experimental protocol would be expedited. The initial treatment could begin as early as tomorrow. The calculated precision of this statement, the carrot dangled just out of reach, confirmed Eleanor's suspicion that their desperation had been thoroughly assessed and exploited. Yet the pragmatic part of her mind acknowledged that the source of the help mattered less than its effectiveness. If the treatment could save her life, did it matter that it came attached to impossible strings? As the discussion wound down, Eleanor noticed Olivia's increasing fatigue, the adrenaline of the extraordinary conversation finally giving way to the exhaustion of a 13-year-old who had spent 2 days in a hospital chair watching her mother hover between consciousness and oblivion. I think we need time to discuss this privately, Eleanor said, her tone making it clear the meeting was over. Harmon nodded agreeably. Of course, the Sheikh understands this is not a decision to be made lightly. He placed the leather portfolio on the bedside table. The documents are here for your review, including the modifications we discussed regarding communication schedules and educational guarantees. The funds would be transferred immediately upon signing. Dr. Malik rose, placing a business card beside the portfolio. "My personal number," she said to Olivia. "If you have any questions, any at all, about life in Dubai or the household, please call me directly." Woman to woman. The gesture seemed genuine, a small kindness in a transaction that otherwise felt coldly commercial. Eleanor nodded her thanks, waiting until both visitors had left before exhaling a shaky breath. "What do you think?" Olivia asked, her voice small with exhaustion and the weight of the decision before them. Eleanor's heart clenched painfully. What did she think? She thought it was obscene that a mother and child should be forced into such an impossible choice. She thought the wealth disparity that allowed a foreign billionaire to effectively purchase a young girl's future was a grotesque indictment of a world where healthcare was a luxury rather than a right. She thought no amount of legal documents could truly protect her daughter once she was halfway around the world in a culture with drastically different values regarding women and children. But she also thought of Dr. Lancaster's prognosis, of the experimental treatment that represented her only realistic chance at survival, of Olivia's determined face as she declared she wouldn't watch her mother die when there was an alternative. "I think," Eleanor said carefully, "that we need to read every word of those documents. And if we decide to consider this, we need a lawyer to review them first." Olivia's eyes widened. "We can't afford a lawyer. There's a legal aid clinic at the community center. It's not ideal, but it's something." Eleanor reached for her daughter's hand. "Olivia, I need you to understand something. If we do this, and I haven't decided yet, it wouldn't be forever. I would work every day, save every penny, to bring you home as soon as possible." Olivia nodded, tears welling in her eyes despite her obvious efforts to remain composed. "I know, Mom, and I'd work hard too. Learn everything I could, take every opportunity. So when I come back, I can help make things better for both of us." The painful optimism in her daughter's voice, the desperate belief that this sacrifice could somehow lead to a better future for them both, threatened to shatter Eleanor's fragile composure. How had it come to this? How had their lives narrowed to such an impossible choice? "Let's rest now," Eleanor said, unable to continue the conversation without breaking down completely. "We'll look at everything tomorrow when we're both stronger." Olivia nodded, curling up as best she could in the uncomfortable hospital chair, her small hand still clutching Eleanor's. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed her, her breathing deepening into the rhythms of sleep. Eleanor remained awake, watching her daughter's face in repose, so much younger and more vulnerable in sleep than in her fierce waking determination. The weight of maternal responsibility had never felt heavier. To keep Olivia with her might mean leaving her alone in the world far too soon. To send her away might mean subjecting her to unknown dangers and hardships, separated from the only parent and home she had ever known. The monitoring equipment continued its steady beeping, marking the passage of time as Eleanor wrestled with the most impossible decision of her life. Outside the window, Detroit's night skyline glittered with distant lights, some belonging to the wealthy offices and condominiums of the revitalized downtown, others to the struggling neighborhoods where families like theirs fought daily battles against poverty and illness and systemic indifference. Somewhere in that city was their small apartment with its dripping faucet and drafty windows, the unicorn bank containing Olivia's meager savings, the drawer full of unpaid bills and desperate calculations. A life that was difficult and precarious but utterly their own. And somewhere across the world was Dubai, with its gleaming towers and unimaginable wealth, its foreign customs and unknown expectations. A place where Olivia might receive opportunities beyond anything Eleanor could provide, or where she might face challenges and pressures no 13-year-old should endure. Eleanor closed her eyes, the medication finally pulling her towards sleep despite her resistance. Her last conscious thought was a prayer to a God she wasn't sure she still believed in, a desperate plea for wisdom and strength in the face of an impossible choice. The dripping faucet of their apartment was silent here, but in her mind, it continued its relentless rhythm, counting down the moments until a decision could no longer be deferred. 3 weeks after signing the guardianship agreement, Eleanor stood in their small bedroom watching Olivia methodically pack her belongings into a sleek navy suitcase provided by Harmon. The experimental treatment had begun working its tentative magic, giving Eleanor enough strength to be discharged from the hospital, though her body remained weakened and prone to exhaustion. Each movement required careful calculation, each day a delicate balance between necessary activity and essential rest. The paperwork had been signed yesterday after review by a harried legal aid attorney, who had done his best with an agreement so unusual he'd admitted he had no precedent to guide him. The money had been transferred immediately, $10,000 that had instantly vanished into the maw of medical bills and treatment costs, their material circumstances essentially unchanged despite the fortune that had briefly passed through their hands. Olivia moved with the efficient precision that characterized everything she did, carefully rolling each garment to maximize space in the suitcase. Her small collection of clothes looked pitifully inadequate against the expensive luggage's cavernous interior. Harmon had assured them that a new wardrobe would be provided in Dubai, but Olivia had insisted on bringing certain items. The faded NASA t-shirt Eleanor had bought her after a school field trip to the museum, the hand-knitted sweater for Mrs. Guzman, the worn jeans with equations scribbled in pen along the inner seam. "Do you think I should take my winter coat?" Olivia asked, holding up the puffy blue jacket that had been a Christmas gift 2 years ago, already too small across the shoulders. "Do they even have winter in Dubai?" "It gets cool at night in the winter months," Eleanor replied, remembering information from the endless research she'd conducted since their decision. "But nothing like Michigan. I think you can leave it. Save the space for your books." Olivia nodded, setting the coat aside and turning to the small bookshelf that held her most prized possessions. She ran her fingers along the spines, selecting volumes with careful deliberation, her dog-eared copy of A Brief History of Time, the French poetry collection she'd found at a library sale, the calculus textbook she'd saved allowance money for months to purchase. Eleanor watched silently, memorizing each movement, each expression that crossed her daughter's face. In the 3 weeks since they'd made their decision, they'd operated in a state of suspended emotion, focusing on practical preparations rather than the enormity of their imminent separation. It was easier, somehow, to discuss what clothes to pack than to acknowledge that in less than 24 hours, they would be separated by continents and cultures and legal guardianship. "Mom," Olivia said suddenly, breaking the careful silence they'd maintained all morning. "Are you sure about this? We could still change our minds." The question pierced Eleanor's carefully maintained composure. She crossed the small room in 3 steps, gathering Olivia in her arms, feeling the fragile structure of her daughter's shoulders, the racing heartbeat beneath her ribs. "I'm not sure about anything," she admitted, her voice muffled against Olivia's hair, "except that I love you more than anything in this world, and I would never agree to this if I thought there was any other way." Olivia's arms tightened around Eleanor's waist. "The treatment is working, though," she said, a note of desperate hope in her voice. "Maybe we don't need to do this anymore. Maybe we could give the money back and tell them I'm not going." For one wild moment, Eleanor allowed herself to consider this possibility. The first round of treatment had indeed shown promising results. Her blood counts were improving, the pain had decreased significantly, and Dr. Lancaster had cautiously used the word responding during their last consultation. But the full course of the experimental protocol would require months of continued treatment, follow-up care, medications that their insurance would never cover. The $10,000 would barely cover the initial phase, leaving nothing for the critical continuation that would determine whether the cancer truly retreated or simply regrouped for a more aggressive return. "Sweetheart," Eleanor said gently, pulling back to look into Olivia's eyes, "the treatment is working because we accepted their offer. We need to follow through with our part of the agreement." Olivia nodded, her expression settling back into the preternatural maturity that had guided her through this impossible process. "I know. I just thought." She trailed off, returning to her methodical packing with renewed determination. Eleanor sank onto the edge of the bed, watching as Olivia selected a few remaining treasures to fit into the limited space. The small wooden box that had belonged to Eleanor's mother, a collection of polished stones gathered from the shores of Lake Michigan during a rare childhood vacation, the calculator Eleanor had scrimped and saved to buy for Olivia's 12th birthday. "Dr. Malik called this morning," Eleanor said, breaking the renewed silence. "She wanted to check that we had everything ready." She said she'd be there personally to meet your flight in Dubai. Olivia nodded without looking up. She seems nice. Yes, Eleanor agreed, grateful for the doctor's steady presence throughout the arrangements. While Harmon had handled the business aspects with detached efficiency, Dr. Malik had taken time to speak with Olivia privately, answering her questions about daily life in the Al-Nazari household, the local culture, what to expect in those first disorienting days. Her candid assessments, acknowledging challenges as well as opportunities, had provided a counterbalance to Harmon's polished assurances. "Mom," Olivia said, hesitating over a framed photograph of the two of them at a school science fair where Olivia had won first prize. "Can I take this?" "Of course, sweetheart." Eleanor swallowed against the tightness in her throat. "Take whatever helps you feel connected to home." Home. The word hung between them, laden with meaning. This apartment with its leaking faucet and drafty windows had been their sanctuary, however humble. The thought of Eleanor returning here alone after tomorrow, of Olivia's absence filling the small rooms like an invisible presence, was almost unbearable. A knock at the front door interrupted the moment. Eleanor glanced at her watch, 11:30 a.m. Too early for Harmon, who wasn't scheduled to collect Olivia until 4 p.m. for her evening flight. "I'll get it," she said, rising carefully to avoid triggering the dizziness that still occasionally plagued her. She opened the door to find Mrs. Guzman from apartment 3B, her round face creased with concern, a foil-covered dish in her hands. "Eleanor," the older woman said warmly, pressing the dish forward. "I made tamales. For you and Olivia. Before." She trailed off, her eyes darting past Eleanor to where Olivia stood in the bedroom doorway. Before her trip, they had told neighbors that Olivia had received a prestigious scholarship to a boarding school abroad. A simplified version of the truth that avoided uncomfortable explanations. Mrs. Guzman, with her sharp eyes and maternal instincts, clearly suspected there was more to the story but had respected their privacy, offering practical support instead of intrusive questions. "Thank you," Eleanor said, accepting the dish with genuine gratitude. The thought of cooking had been beyond her limited energy reserves, and having a home-cooked meal for their last dinner together was a kindness she hadn't anticipated. Mrs. Guzman hesitated, then pulled a small package from her pocket, wrapped in colorful tissue paper. "For Olivia," she said, holding it out to the girl who had approached quietly. "A little something to remember us by." Olivia accepted the gift with both hands, her practiced composure momentarily cracking to reveal the vulnerable child beneath. "Thank you, Mrs. Guzman, for everything." The older woman enveloped Olivia in a fierce hug. "You write to us, yes? Tell us about all the amazing things you will learn and see. And remember, no matter how far you go, you always have family here who loves you." Eleanor blinked back tears at the simple kindness, the acknowledgement of their small community that had developed over years of shared hallways and borrowed cups of sugar and watchful eyes on Olivia when Eleanor worked late shifts. After Mrs. Guzman departed, a steady stream of neighbors appeared throughout the early afternoon. Mr. Wu from the ground floor bringing a red envelope containing lucky money, Ms. Jackson from across the hall offering a journal to record all your adventures. The Rodriguez twins presenting a bracelet of braided threads, so you don't forget us. Each visitor brought a small token and carefully phrased good wishes that skirted the edges of the situation's strangeness, the collective intuition that this was not a normal departure for a normal educational opportunity. By 3 p.m., Olivia's suitcase was packed, supplemented by a canvas tote bag containing the various farewell gifts. They sat at the kitchen table eating Mrs. Guzman's tamales in a silence heavy with unspoken words. Eleanor watched Olivia push food around her plate. Her earlier appetite vanished as departure time approached. "You should eat," Eleanor urged gently. "It will be a long flight." Olivia nodded mechanically and took a small bite. Harmon said there would be food on the plane. Special food. She pronounced the word special with a faint edge of sarcasm, her first display of typical teenage attitude in weeks. Eleanor smiled despite herself. "I'm sure the food will be very fancy, but Mrs. Guzman's tamales are special in their own way." Olivia glanced up, a ghost of a smile crossing her face. No one in Dubai will make tamales like Mrs. Guzman. No, Eleanor agreed. Just like no one makes pierogi like Mrs. Novak or chai like Mr. Patel. She reached across the table to cover Olivia's hand with her own. You're taking a piece of all of us with you, Liv. Everyone who loves you. Olivia's composure cracked, tears spilling onto her cheeks. I don't want to go, she whispered, the brave front finally collapsing. I'm scared, Mom. What if they're mean to me? What if the sheik really does want to marry me when I'm older? What if I never see you again? The fears that had lurked beneath the surface of their practical preparations erupted in a torrent, Olivia's voice rising with each terrified question. Eleanor rounded the table and pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her as tightly as her weakened body would allow. Listen to me, she said fiercely. The legal agreement is clear. You are going as a ward of the family, not as a future bride. Dr. Malik has promised to watch out for you personally. We have arranged for weekly emails and monthly video calls. The American Embassy in Dubai has been notified of your status. She stroked Olivia's hair, wishing she could infuse her words with more certainty than she felt. And if at any point you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, you tell Dr. Malik or contact the embassy. The agreement includes the right to terminate the arrangement. These protections had been painstakingly negotiated, the legal aid attorney adding clauses and conditions to the original agreement until Harmon had shown visible impatience. Eleanor had remained firm, refusing to proceed without written guarantees of Olivia's safety and autonomy. Whether these paper protections would hold any weight once Olivia was in Dubai remained an open question that haunted Eleanor's restless nights. But what if they don't let me communicate? Olivia pressed, voicing the fear that Eleanor herself couldn't shake. What if they take away my phone or computer? Then you find another way, Eleanor said with a conviction she didn't entirely feel. You're the smartest person I know, Olivia Wilson. You speak 3 languages already. You'll learn Arabic. You'll figure out the system. And you'll find a way to let me know if you need help. Olivia wiped her eyes, visibly gathering her composure. I'll learn everything I can, she promised. And when I come back, I'll have skills and knowledge that can help us both. Maybe I can get a scholarship to a real university, or find a job that pays enough for both of us. The practiced optimism, the desperate need to believe the sacrifice would eventually lead to a better future for them both, broke Eleanor's heart anew. At 13, Olivia should be worried about school dances and friendship bracelets, not planning how her forced expatriation might eventually lift her family from poverty. A sleek black car pulled up outside their building, visible through the kitchen window, precisely on time. Eleanor felt a wave of resentment at Harmon's punctuality, the methodical execution of a plan that would tear her family apart. He's here, she said unnecessarily, as Olivia had already spotted the vehicle. They moved in a daze of unreality, gathering Olivia's luggage, doing a final check of the bedroom to ensure nothing essential had been forgotten. Eleanor tucked an envelope into the side pocket of Olivia's carry-on bag, a letter she had written over several nights, pouring out her love and regret and hopes, to be read when Olivia was alone on the long flight. The knock when it came seemed too polite, too ordinary for the momentous transition it heralded. Eleanor opened the door to find Harmon standing in the hallway, his expression professionally sympathetic. Mrs. Wilson, Olivia, I trust you're ready for departure. His gaze took in the suitcase, the canvas tote, Olivia's tear-stained face. If he noticed the emotional devastation his presence embodied, he gave no sign beyond a slight softening of his tone. The car is waiting downstairs. I have a colleague who will drive us to the airport while I review some final details with you both. Eleanor nodded mechanically, unable to speak past the constriction in her throat. Olivia squared her shoulders, the vulnerable child of moments ago replaced by the composed young woman who had navigated this impossible process with preternatural maturity. The elevator ride to the ground floor passed in silence. Outside, Harmon's colleague, a younger man with the same polished efficiency, took Olivia's luggage and placed it in the car's trunk while Harmon held the rear door open for Eleanor and Olivia. The drive to Detroit Metropolitan Airport seemed simultaneously endless and far too brief. Harmon used the time to review practical matters, Olivia's documentation, the flight itinerary, the arrangements for her arrival in Dubai. Eleanor listened with half an ear, her focus entirely on the warm presence of Olivia beside her. Their hands clasped tightly on the seat between them. Sheikh Al-Nazari has arranged for Olivia to travel in first class, Harmon was saying, a detail that meant nothing to Eleanor. The flight will stop briefly in London, but she won't need to change planes. A flight attendant has been assigned to check on her throughout the journey, and as Mrs. Wilson knows, Dr. Malik will personally meet Olivia upon arrival in Dubai. Olivia nodded, absorbing these logistical details with the same focused attention she brought to complex mathematical problems. How long is the flight? Approximately 14 hours to London, then 7 more to Dubai, Harmon replied. You'll arrive around 7 p.m. local time tomorrow. The Sheikh's household operates on a schedule that will allow you a day to rest before beginning orientation to your new surroundings. Your new surroundings. The clinical phrase for what would be Olivia's home for the next 8 years fell between them like a stone. Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand, feeling an answering pressure that conveyed volumes of unspoken emotion. The airport, when they arrived, was crowded with the usual chaos of travelers. Families wrestling with luggage, business people striding purposefully toward gates, emotional farewells and excited greetings. Their small group moved through this ordinary human drama like ghosts, engaged in a transaction so extraordinary it seemed to exist in a parallel reality. Harmon guided them to a separate check-in area for premium passengers, where Olivia's luggage was weighed and tagged with efficient courtesy. The attendant handed Olivia a boarding pass with a look of mild surprise at her youth, but asked no questions about a 13-year-old traveling internationally alone. We have a private lounge where you can wait comfortably until boarding, Harmon informed them, gesturing toward a discreet doorway guarded by a uniformed attendant. It would be best to proceed through security now, as there are some additional procedures for unaccompanied minors. The moment Eleanor had dreaded slammed into her with physical force. Security meant separation. Once Olivia passed through those gates, there would be no turning back, no last-minute change of heart. The bureaucratic machinery of international travel would take over, propelling her daughter away with the inexorable force of a conveyor belt. Could we have a moment, please? Eleanor managed, her voice barely audible. Harmon nodded with practiced understanding. Of course, I'll wait by security to escort Olivia through the process. He stepped away, giving them the illusion of privacy in the bustling terminal. Eleanor turned to face her daughter, taking in every detail of her appearance. The dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, the second-hand clothes nearly arranged, the two-adult composure that barely contained the frightened child beneath. She cupped Olivia's face between her palms, overcome by the desperate need to imprint this moment, this last touch, in her memory. I love you, she said, her voice breaking on the simple declaration. More than anything in this world. Remember that no matter what happens, no matter where you are or how much time passes, you are loved, Olivia Wilson, completely and unconditionally. Olivia's careful composure shattered. She flung her arms around Eleanor's waist, burying her face against her mother's shoulder. I love you too, Mom, she sobbed, her body shaking with the force of her emotion. I'll make you proud, I promise. I'll learn everything I can and be strong and find a way to come back to you. You already make me proud, Eleanor whispered fiercely. Every day just by being you. Your kindness, your brilliance, your courage. There is nothing you could ever do to make me more proud than I already am. They clung to each other, oblivious to the curious glances of passing travelers, the quiet murmurs of sympathy from those who assumed they were witnessing a normal parting of mother and daughter. If only they knew, Eleanor thought distantly, the bizarre circumstances that had led to this moment. A daughter essentially sold to secure a mother's medical treatment, a desperate gamble disguised as an educational opportunity. Mrs. Wilson, Harmon's voice broke gently into their embrace. I'm afraid we need to proceed through security now to ensure Olivia has time for all the necessary procedures. Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. She pressed a final kiss to Olivia's forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of her drugstore shampoo, the indefinable essence of her child. Go! she managed. "Email me as soon as you land." Olivia straightened, wiping her tears with a determined hand. "I will. And I'll be fine, Mom. Really, this is the right thing. For both of us." The practiced reassurance, the child comforting the parent when it should have been the reverse, broke something fundamental in Eleanor's heart. She watched as Olivia shouldered her carry-on bag, took a deep breath, and turned to follow Harmon toward the security checkpoint. At the last moment, Olivia glanced back, her expression a complex mixture of fear, determination, and love that Eleanor knew would haunt her dreams for years to come. Then she was gone, swallowed by the machinery of airport security, her small figure receding into a future Eleanor could neither see nor protect her from. Eleanor stood frozen, watching the space where Olivia had disappeared long after she was no longer visible. Around her, the airport continued its normal operations. Announcements echoing overhead, travelers rushing to gates, emotional reunions and separations playing out with ordinary intensity. How strange that the world didn't stop, didn't even pause, to acknowledge the enormity of what had just occurred. Eventually, her legs no longer able to support her, Eleanor found a seat in the terminal's public area. The exhaustion that was her constant companion since the cancer diagnosis washed over her in waves, amplified by the emotional devastation of the day. She should go home, back to the empty apartment where Olivia's absence would fill every corner like a physical presence. But she couldn't bring herself to leave, not while Olivia's plane remained on American soil, not while there was still some tenuous connection to her child. Hours passed. Eleanor sat motionless, watching the departures board as Olivia's flight moved from boarding to departed. With such ordinary finality, it seemed impossible it could represent such an extraordinary severing. Only then, when the bureaucratic declaration confirmed what her heart already knew, that Olivia was truly gone, traveling away from her at hundreds of miles per hour, did Eleanor finally rise and make her way to the exit. The trip home on public transportation passed in a fog of unreality. The apartment, when she unlocked the door, felt cavernous despite its modest size. Eleanor moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching Olivia's belongings that remained. The books deemed too heavy to pack, the winter clothes she wouldn't need in Dubai's climate, the collection of science fair ribbons pinned to the bulletin board. In the bedroom, Olivia's bed was neatly made, the worn comforter smoothed with characteristic precision. Eleanor sank onto its edge, finally allowing the tears she had controlled at the airport to flow freely. She wept for the impossibility of their situation, for the desperation that had led her to this unthinkable decision, for the years of Olivia's life she would miss, for the unknown challenges her child would face alone in a foreign land. When the storm of grief finally subsided, leaving her hollow and exhausted, Eleanor reached for the small box on Olivia's nightstand, the one item her daughter had deliberated over longest before deciding to leave behind. Inside was Olivia's most precious possession, a smooth stone with a natural hole through its center, found during their only vacation together at Lake Michigan. Local legend held that such stones were fairy stones, capable of granting wishes and providing protection. Olivia had kept it beside her bed since she was 7, occasionally holding it up to her eye to see the world differently, as she explained to Eleanor. When asked why she wasn't taking it to Dubai, Olivia had simply said, "You need its protection more than I do now." Eleanor curled her fingers around the stone, its smooth surface warm against her palm. In the silence of the apartment, broken only by the familiar drip of the kitchen faucet, she made a solemn promise to the daughter now thousands of miles away. She would survive this cancer, rebuild her strength, and find a way to bring Olivia home. Whatever it took, however long it required, she would not rest until their family was whole again. The first email arrived 3 days later, sent from an unfamiliar address but unmistakably Olivia's voice. "Dear Mom, I've arrived safely in Dubai. The flight was long but comfortable. The seat could turn into a bed, and they served meals on real china plates. I watched 3 movies and started learning Arabic from an app on the tablet they gave me. Dr. Malik met me at the airport as promised. She was very kind and explained everything as we drove to the Sheikh's compound. It's enormous, Mom, like nothing I've ever seen. Everything is marble and gold and perfect carpets. My room is bigger than our whole apartment, with its own bathroom and a balcony overlooking gardens with fountains. I haven't met the sheik yet. Dr. Malik says he's away on business for a few days. I've met his wife Amira, who seems nice but very reserved. She showed me around part of the women's wing of the house and introduced me to her personal staff. Everyone speaks English to me so far, but I hear Arabic constantly and am trying to pick up basic phrases. Tomorrow I meet with the tutor who will assess my educational level and design a curriculum. Dr. Malik says they're very impressed with my language abilities and want to nurture my mathematical talent. How are you feeling? Is the treatment continuing to work? Please take care of yourself and don't worry about me. I'm safe and being treated well. This was the right decision. I miss you more than I can say. Please write back to this email address. All my love. Olivia. Eleanor read the email over and over, analyzing every word for hidden meanings, searching between the lines for any indication of distress or danger. The message seemed genuinely positive, if somewhat formal compared to Olivia's usual communication style. Whether this reflected newfound maturity, careful self-censorship, or the possibility that someone else was reviewing her correspondence was impossible to determine. She composed a response that struck a careful balance, expressing her love and concern without revealing the depth of her emotional devastation, asking questions about Olivia's daily life without seeming to probe for problems, maintaining an optimistic tone about her own health while acknowledging the challenges of treatment. After reading it a dozen times, she finally pressed send, launching her words across oceans and continents to the daughter who seemed simultaneously so near in thought and so impossibly distant in physical reality. For the next several weeks, communication settled into a rhythm, emails arriving every few days from Olivia, each one carefully positive while hinting at the significant adjustments she was making. Eleanor learned about the rigorous educational program that had been designed for her daughter, the language lessons that now included Arabic and Mandarin in addition to her existing French and Spanish, the etiquette training that taught everything from which fork to use at formal dinners to the proper way to address members of the Gulf states' royal families. In one particularly detailed message, Olivia described her first formal meeting with the sheik. The sheik finally returned from his business trip and formally welcomed me to the household. He was very different from what I expected, younger, for one thing, maybe in his early 40s. He speaks perfect English with a British accent and asked detailed questions about my education and interests. When I mentioned my love for mathematics, he seemed genuinely pleased and said he studied engineering at Oxford before taking over the family business interests. Amira seems more relaxed now that he's home. I think she was nervous about being responsible for me on her own. The household dynamic is interesting. There are 3 wives, each with her own wing of the compound, but Amira is clearly the favorite. The others, Noor and Fatima, are polite but distant with me. I gather from the staff's whispers that my presence was Amira's idea and not entirely supported by the others. My days are very structured. I wake at 6 a.m. for breakfast, then have lessons from 7 o'clock until noon with various tutors. After lunch, I have cultural instruction, everything from Arabic calligraphy to Islamic history. In the evenings, I'm expected to join whichever wife I'm assigned to for dinner, usually Amira. It's all very formal and scheduled, which I actually don't mind. The structure helps me feel less lost. How are you feeling? Are you taking your medications exactly as prescribed? Are you eating enough? I worry about you being alone. The slight shift in tone was subtle but noticeable to Eleanor's maternal instinct. The careful neutrality when describing the sheik, the mention of household tensions, the regimented schedule that left little room for a young girl's natural spontaneity. Yet there were no explicit complaints, no obvious red flags that would justify intervention. When the first video call was arranged, exactly 1 month after Olivia's departure, as specified in their agreement, Eleanor spent hours preparing, determined to present a strong front for her daughter. She washed her thinning hair, applied subtle makeup to disguise the pallor left by ongoing treatment, and chose clothing that disguised her weight loss. The image that appeared on her laptop screen nearly shattered this careful composure. Olivia, dressed in what appeared to be a conservative Western-style outfit of expensive materials, her hair neatly styled in a way Eleanor had never seen before, sat in what looked like an ornate study with gilded bookshelves visible in the background. But it was her expression, a careful mask of politeness that dropped momentarily into naked longing when she first saw Eleanor, that told the real story. Mom! The single word contained volumes of emotion. Olivia, Eleanor responded, drinking in the sight of her daughter while noting the subtle changes. She looked somehow older, more poised, her posture straighter and her gestures more contained than the energetic 13-year-old who had left Detroit only a month before. You look wonderful, sweetheart. Are you well? They spoke carefully for the allocated 30 minutes, each clearly censoring their words. Olivia provided upbeat descriptions of her education, the fascinating aspects of Dubai culture, the kindness shown by Dr. Malik, who visited regularly to check on her adjustment. Eleanor shared positive news about her treatment, the supportive messages from neighbors, the letters she was writing to document everything Olivia might want to know about her days. It was only in the final moments, when a discreet knock indicated their time was ending, that Olivia's composure cracked slightly. Mom, she said quickly, leaning closer to the camera. I'm okay, really, but it's not what. She glanced over her shoulder, then back at the screen, her expression suddenly neutral again. I have to go. I love you. Stay strong. The screen went dark before Eleanor could respond, leaving her with a profound sense of unease. It's not what? Not what they promised. Not what she expected. The truncated sentence haunted Eleanor, amplifying her constant worry about what wasn't being said in their carefully positive communications. 2 weeks later, a shorter, more formal email arrived. Dear Mom, I hope this finds you well and responding to treatment. Things continue as before. My Arabic is improving rapidly, and the mathematics tutor has moved me to university-level calculus, which presents a welcome challenge. There have been some adjustments to my daily routine. The Sheikh has been taking a more direct interest in my education. My schedule has been intensified with less free time than before. Dr. Malik says this is because they're impressed with my progress. Amira has been less present lately. I don't see her as often as I did at first. The other wives maintain their distance. Most of my interaction is with tutors and staff now. I don't want you to worry. I am safe and well treated. My needs are met more than adequately. The education I'm receiving is exceptional, far beyond anything available in Detroit. Please tell me more about your treatment. Are you following the doctor's instructions exactly? Are you eating properly? I miss you. Love, Olivia. The shift toward greater formality, the lack of personal details, the deflection toward Eleanor's health, all signaled a change that Eleanor couldn't fully interpret but that amplified her concern. Her reply, filled with careful questions about Olivia's daily life and subtle offers of help if needed, received a notably delayed response that was even briefer than before. As months passed, the pattern of communication settled into something Eleanor hadn't anticipated and couldn't quite accept. Emails from Olivia became less frequent, more formal, and increasingly focused on educational achievements rather than personal experiences. The monthly video calls were often rescheduled, shortened, or canceled due to scheduling conflicts. And when they did occur, Olivia appeared increasingly guarded, speaking in careful generalities while avoiding specific details about her daily life. 6 months after Olivia's departure, Eleanor received an official email from Dr. Malik explaining that Olivia was entering an intensive educational phase that would limit her personal communications for the foreseeable future. Monthly written updates would be provided, with video calls reduced to quarterly occurrences as the schedule permits. These formal updates arrived with mechanical precision. Clinical reports on Olivia's academic progress, health status, and general welfare, utterly lacking the personal connection Eleanor craved. Her increasingly desperate emails to Harmon were met with professional reassurances that the guardianship agreement was being honored and that Olivia was thriving under the Sheikh's patronage. A year into their separation, during one of the rare video calls, Eleanor noticed something that sent a chill through her. As Olivia spoke about her recent mathematical studies, the camera angle shifted slightly, revealing a glimpse of her room, not the students' quarters initially described, but a more ornate space with what appeared to be gold-trimmed furnishings and elaborate textiles. More telling was the traditional clothing visible hanging in a partially open closet behind her, women's formal attire that seemed inappropriate for a 14-year-old girl. Olivia, Eleanor interrupted carefully, Your room looks different. Have you moved within the compound? A shadow crossed Olivia's face before her expression smoothed into practiced neutrality. Yes, I've been relocated to quarters closer to the main household. It's more convenient for my current educational program. Before Eleanor could probe further, Olivia quickly changed the subject, asking detailed questions about Eleanor's health that consumed the remaining minutes of their call. When they said goodbye, Olivia's carefully maintained composure cracked just for a moment, her eyes communicating a desperation that her words couldn't express. "Mom," she said softly, "remember the stones we found at Lake Michigan? How you said some things have to be seen through a different perspective to be understood. I think about that a lot." The reference to their private conversation about the fairy stone, the one Olivia had left behind for Eleanor's protection, seemed deliberate, loaded with meaning Eleanor couldn't fully decipher. Before she could respond, the call ended abruptly, leaving Eleanor staring at a blank screen. The following day, Eleanor received a brief, formal email announcing that due to educational commitments and cultural immersion requirements, Olivia's communication would be further restricted to quarterly written updates provided through official channels. Any urgent matters should be directed to Mr. Harmon, who remained their designated liaison. Eleanor's frantic attempts to reach Harmon, to understand what was happening, to demand the contact with her daughter guaranteed in their agreement, met with increasingly distant responses. The agreement, he reminded her in careful legal language, provided for reasonable communication subject to the educational and cultural needs of Olivia's development. The sheik, as legal guardian, had the authority to determine what constituted reasonable based on Olivia's best interests. As the second year of their separation began, with direct communication reduced to occasional stilted letters clearly written under supervision and rare, brief video calls where Olivia appeared increasingly distant and formal, Eleanor faced a terrible realization. The protections she had so carefully negotiated were essentially unenforceable against the sheik's wealth, power, and international standing. The agreement that had seemed to safeguard Olivia's welfare and maintain their connection now revealed itself as paper-thin, its provisions subject to interpretation by those who held all the power. The experimental treatment had indeed forced Eleanor's cancer into remission, giving her the physical strength to fight for her daughter, but she found herself trapped in a labyrinth of diplomatic protocols, international legal complexities, and the impenetrable shield of the sheik's wealth and influence. The American embassy in Dubai, when she finally managed to reach them, confirmed only that they had conducted the required welfare checks and found Olivia to be in good health, receiving an excellent education, and showing no signs of distress during their supervised visits. "But did you speak with her alone?" Eleanor demanded during one frustrating phone call. "Did you ask her directly if she wants to come home?" Mrs. Wilson, the consular official, replied with practiced patience. "Sheikh Al-Nazari is a prominent businessman with significant diplomatic connections. We conduct our checks according to protocol. Your daughter appears to be thriving in his household. She's receiving an education most American parents could only dream of providing." The implication was clear. A poor single mother from Detroit had no standing to challenge the educational decisions of a wealthy benefactor who was, on paper at least, providing her daughter with extraordinary opportunities. The class divide that had forced their separation in the first place now ensured its continuation. Eleanor's health improved steadily as the treatment progressed, but her peace of mind deteriorated with each passing month of limited contact with Olivia. She channeled her growing anxiety into action, working extra shifts to save money, researching international guardianship laws, connecting with advocacy organizations for families separated by questionable legal arrangements. She moved from their old apartment to a small house in a slightly better neighborhood, creating a home for Olivia to return to when, not if, she insisted to herself when she finally came back. In the rare communications that came directly from Olivia, Eleanor began to notice a pattern. Certain phrases repeated across letters, particular questions about memories they shared, references to their past conversations about codes and secret messages. It took months for Eleanor to recognize what Olivia was attempting. A carefully constructed system of communication hidden within the supervised letters. One letter mentioned how Olivia was studying the traditions of family connections in Gulf culture, especially the bonds between mothers and daughters, and asked Eleanor if she remembered how we used to play that game where words had double meanings. Another referenced the fairy stone and asked if Eleanor still kept it, to see things that aren't immediately visible. Following these breadcrumbs, Eleanor began to search for patterns. The first letter of certain paragraphs, words that seemed unnecessarily emphasized, references to their shared past that contained subtle deviations from reality. Gradually, a fragmented message emerged across multiple communications, never explicit enough to alert censors but clear enough for a mother attuned to her daughter's mind. Not what they said. Watch for signs. Learning to navigate. Don't worry yet. The cryptic warning confirmed Eleanor's worst fears, while simultaneously offering a thread of hope. Olivia was alerting her that the situation wasn't as presented, but she was also signaling that she was finding ways to adapt, to understand the system she was trapped within. The "don't worry yet" suggested both that there was reason to worry and that Olivia believed she could manage the situation for now. This hidden communication sustained Eleanor through the increasing formality of the official updates, the canceled video calls, the sense that Olivia was gradually being absorbed into a world Eleanor could neither access nor comprehend. Her daughter was still there, still thinking, still fighting in her own quiet, methodical way. Near the end of the second year, just as direct communication had dwindled to almost nothing, a small package arrived at Eleanor's home. It contained a delicate bracelet of braided silk threads in shades of blue and green, with no note or return address. The significance would have been obscure to anyone else, but Eleanor recognized it immediately. Years ago, they had read a novel together about a kidnapped girl who smuggled coded messages to her family using seemingly innocent objects. In their private discussions afterward, they had created their own symbolic language. Colored threads indicated emotional states. Blue for sad but coping, green for hope and determination, and textile patterns conveyed situations. The intricate diagonal weave of this bracelet, according to their childhood code, meant trapped but finding paths. Eleanor wore the bracelet constantly, a tangible connection to her distant daughter and a reminder that Olivia, true to her nature, was mapping the territory of her confinement, seeking understanding and, perhaps, eventual escape. 2.5 years after Olivia's departure, Eleanor received what would be the last direct communication for a very long time. A formal letter from Sheikh al-Nazari himself, explaining that Olivia would be entering the final phase of her specialized education, which required complete immersion without distractions from her former life. All direct communication would cease for an unspecified period. The Sheikh assured Eleanor that her daughter remained in excellent health and was exceeding all expectations in ways that will secure her future. Accompanying this clinical severing was a small card bearing what appeared to be a simple drawing of a sunrise, supposedly from Olivia. But Eleanor, studying it with desperate attention, recognized the pattern of rays around the sun formed a specific number sequence, the same one they had sometimes used to mark pages in books they shared, indicating critical information. The message was clear to Eleanor alone. Olivia was telling her that this silence was not her choice, but that she remained determined to find her way back when circumstances allowed. The anguish of this final separation was tempered only by Eleanor's growing conviction that her daughter remained essentially herself, clever, resourceful, and unbroken despite the controlling environment. The coded messages, however infrequent and disguised, suggested a mind that remained independent and focused on eventual reunion. For the next year and a half, Eleanor received only formal quarterly reports about Olivia's academic progress, health status, and general welfare. These clinical documents, always signed by Dr. Malik but clearly not written in her earlier, warmer style, reduced Olivia to a collection of achievements and vital statistics, language proficiency levels, mathematical aptitude scores, physical development metrics. The girl herself, her personality and spirit, was entirely absent from these sterile accounts. Eleanor's increasingly desperate attempts to reestablish direct contact were met with polite but firm rejections. The guardianship agreement, Harmon reminded her in carefully phrased emails, gave the Sheikh broad authority over Olivia's education and daily activities. Without evidence of mistreatment, which the formal reports and embassy checks specifically contradicted, there were no grounds to challenge the communication restrictions. In her darkest moments, Eleanor wondered if she had made an unforgivable mistake, trading her daughter's freedom and childhood for her own survival. The experimental treatment had indeed saved her life, Her cancer remained in remission after 4 years, her strength largely restored. But at what cost to Olivia? Had she condemned her bright, curious daughter to a life of restriction and control in a culture fundamentally different from their own? The possibility haunted her sleepless nights, driving her to work ever harder at building a home and resources for Olivia's eventual return, whether in months or years. For years after Olivia's departure, as direct communication remained severed and the formal reports continued their mechanical documentation of her daughter's development, Eleanor received an unexpected visitor. She opened her front door one Sunday morning to find Dr. Layla Malik standing on her porch, elegant as ever in a conservative pantsuit, her expression unreadable. "Mrs. Wilson," she said formally, "may I come in? I believe we have matters to discuss regarding your daughter." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs as she wordlessly stepped aside, allowing the doctor to enter the modest home she had created in Olivia's absence. Whatever news had brought the chic sister personally to Detroit after years of clinical distance could not be insignificant. For better or worse, something had changed in the careful equation that had separated her from her daughter for 4 long years. As Dr. Malik seated herself on Eleanor's sofa, her perfect posture and enigmatic expression revealing nothing, Eleanor braced herself for whatever revelation was about to alter the fragile equilibrium of absence and hope that had sustained her through these years of separation. The doctor placed a small envelope on the coffee table between them. "Olivia asked me to deliver this personally," she said, her voice carefully neutral. She felt it could not be trusted to official channels. Eleanor stared at the envelope, her name written in Olivia's unmistakable handwriting. After years of filtered, censored communication, the prospect of an uncensored message from her daughter left her momentarily paralyzed. "You should know," Dr. Malik continued with careful precision, "that my brother's plans for Olivia have evolved since your initial agreement. I believe you have a right to understand the current situation." Eleanor's gaze snapped from the envelope to Dr. Malik's face, searching for clues to this cryptic statement. Whatever had brought the doctor across the world to deliver a message and an explanation suggested complexities beyond the simple guardianship arrangement they had originally discussed. "What do you mean, evolved?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely steady. "What is happening to my daughter?" Dr. Malik's carefully maintained professional demeanor softened slightly, revealing a glimpse of genuine concern. "Read her letter first," she said, gesturing to the envelope. "Then we can discuss what happens next." Eleanor reached for the envelope with trembling fingers, sensing that whatever information it contained would reshape her understanding of Olivia's situation, and perhaps her own role in the years to come. After 4 years of separation and uncertainty, a reckoning had arrived at her doorstep, carried by the very woman who had first assured her of Olivia's safety in the sheik's household. As she carefully opened the seal, Eleanor prepared herself for whatever truth her daughter had risked sending through this unexpected channel. Whether confirmation of her worst fears or a glimpse of hope she had scarcely dared to maintain through these years of silence. Eleanor stared at the envelope in her hands, her name written in Olivia's familiar handwriting. After 4 years of filtered communications and growing silence, the prospect of an uncensored message left her heart racing. "Please," Dr. Malik said quietly, "read it now." With trembling fingers, Eleanor opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. "Dear Mom, if you're reading this, Dr. Malik has kept her promise to deliver my message personally. I've tried to tell you what I could through our coded communications, but there's so much you need to know. First and most important, I am physically safe, but my situation is not what we were told. The agreement with Sheikh al-Nazari was never about providing companionship for Amira or giving me educational opportunities. He brought me here with a specific purpose that was hidden from us both. When I turn 16 next month, the Sheikh intends to make me his 4th wife. This has been his plan from the beginning. Harmon deliberately misled us. The adoption story was fabricated to make the arrangement seem acceptable to American sensibilities and legal standards. I learned the truth during my 2nd year here. Amira discovered I could understand enough Arabic to follow conversations not meant for my ears. She was furious at first, then pitied me when she realized I'd had no idea of my intended role. She's been protecting me as much as she can since then, but her influence is limited. My education hasn't been solely for my benefit. It's been preparation for my role as a wife who can assist with international business matters. The language training, cultural lessons, etiquette, all designed to create a suitable spouse for a man who values appearances and connections as much as the sheik does. The communication restrictions weren't about educational immersion. They were to isolate me from outside influence as the wedding plans progressed. I'm kept in a gilded cage, Mom. Beautiful surroundings, every material need met, but my freedom diminishes each day. Dr. Malik is the only person here who has shown genuine concern for my welfare beyond my value to the sheik. She doesn't approve of her brother's plans for me, especially given my age, but she's been careful in her opposition. Today she's risking her own position to deliver this letter. I need you to understand that any legal attempt to reclaim me will likely fail. The sheik's influence is too great, and he has ensured that all official records show me receiving exceptional care and education. On paper, I am a fortunate ward getting opportunities beyond what most could dream of. I have a plan, but I need time to implement it. I've been studying the sheik's business operations, learning his vulnerabilities, gathering information that might give me leverage. Dr. Malik has agreed to help where she can without compromising her own safety. All I ask is that you trust me, stay strong, and be ready when the time comes. I remain your daughter in every way that matters. I've never forgotten who I am or where I come from. With all my love, Olivia. Eleanor looked up, her face ashen. A wife? He intends to make my 13-year-old daughter his wife? This was his plan all along. Dr. Malik's expression tightened. She's nearly 16 now, but yes, that has been my brother's intention from the beginning. I didn't know at first. I truly believed we were providing her with educational opportunities and a cultural exchange. When I discovered the truth, I began working to protect her in ways that wouldn't alert Khalid to my interference. I need to get her back, Eleanor said, rising to her feet. I'll go to the authorities, the embassy, the media. Please, Dr. Malik raised a hand. Sit down. We need to discuss this carefully. Rash actions will only endanger Olivia further. Eleanor sank back onto the couch, her mind racing through impossible scenarios of rescue and escape. How could I have been so blind? So stupid? I sold my own daughter. You were desperate and misled by professionals who excel at presenting partial truths, Dr. Malik said gently. Harmon has arranged similar transactions before. My brother pays him well to identify exceptional young women from vulnerable families. Transactions? Eleanor's voice broke on the word. You make it sound like he's shopping for commodities. Dr. Malik's face hardened. In many ways, that's exactly what my brother does. His wealth allows him to acquire whatever he desires. Properties, businesses, and yes, people. His previous wives were all arranged marriages of convenience or business advantage. Olivia represents something different. Her intelligence and linguistic abilities would make her valuable in his international dealings. She's a child. In our culture, 16 is not considered a child, though I agree she is too young, Dr. Malik replied carefully. But arguing cultural differences won't help Olivia now. We need a practical approach. Eleanor took a deep breath, forcing herself to think beyond her horror and rage. You mentioned she has a plan. What is it? How can I help? Olivia has been remarkably adaptive, Dr. Malik said, a note of admiration in her voice. She's learned Arabic fluently. Beyond what her tutors know she understands. She's gained the trust of key household staff. She's been quietly gathering information on my brother's business dealings, some of which exist in legal gray areas. She's blackmailing him? Not yet. She's building leverage. Khalid has political aspirations beyond his business empire. A scandal involving an underage American bride could destroy those ambitions, especially with the evidence Olivia has been collecting. Eleanor studied Dr. Malik's face. Why are you helping her? He's your brother. A shadow crossed the doctor's face. I have my reasons. Let's say I understand what it means to be valued primarily for how one can serve a man's ambitions. She straightened, her professional demeanor returning. What matters now is ensuring Olivia's safety while she implements her strategy. What do you need from me? Patience and discretion. Any official complaint or media attention would force my brother to accelerate his plans or send Olivia to one of his more remote properties where she would have less freedom to maneuver. Dr. Malik reached into her bag and withdrew a small, encrypted phone. This is for emergency communications only. The number for Olivia is programmed in. Use it only in absolute necessity. It cannot be traced to either of you. Eleanor took the phone, feeling its weight like a lifeline to her distant daughter. How much time does she need? The wedding is scheduled for 3 months after her 16th birthday. Traditionally, there would be a longer engagement period, but Khalid is eager to solidify her position in the household before she turns 17 and could legally attempt to leave on her own. 3 months, Eleanor whispered. And if her plan fails? Dr. Malik's expression remained carefully neutral. Then we move to more drastic measures. I have contacts who could assist with her extraction, though such an operation would carry significant risks. Eleanor looked down at the letter in her hands, feeling the weight of her daughter's words. All this time, I thought I was saving her from foster care or worse if I died. Instead, I sentenced her to a different kind of prison. You made the best decision you could with the information you had, Dr. Malik said firmly. Now we must make the best decisions with the information we have. Olivia needs you strong and clear-headed, not consumed by guilt. Eleanor nodded, drawing on reserves of strength she had built during her cancer battle and the long years of separation. Tell me what I can do to help her. First, maintain your normal routine. My brother has people monitoring you periodically, nothing intrusive, but reports on significant changes in your behavior or circumstances. Second, prepare for Olivia's potential return. Legal documents, financial arrangements, anything that would facilitate a rapid restart of your life together. And third, Dr. Malik's expression softened slightly. Have faith in your daughter. She's extraordinary, Eleanor. In all my years of medical practice and educational oversight, I've never encountered a mind like hers. If anyone can outmaneuver my brother, it's Olivia. After Dr. Malik departed, Eleanor sat alone in her small living room, Olivia's letter clutched in one hand, the encrypted phone in the other. The truth she had feared for years was finally confirmed. The agreement had never been about education or cultural exchange. It had been a calculated acquisition of a young girl with extraordinary potential, a transaction disguised as philanthropy. The realization that she had essentially sold her daughter into an arranged marriage made Eleanor physically ill. She barely made it to the bathroom before emptying her stomach, her body rejecting the horror of her unwitting complicity. When the spasms subsided, she splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection in the mirror. No more self-pity, she told her haggard image firmly. Olivia needs you to be strong. Over the next several days, Eleanor moved through her life with a new sense of purpose. Outwardly, nothing changed. She went to her job at the community health clinic, maintained her small home, exchanged pleasantries with neighbors. Inwardly, she was mapping contingencies, gathering resources, preparing for whatever signal might come from the encrypted phone that now never left her possession. 2 weeks after Dr. Malik's visit, Eleanor received another sterile quarterly report on Olivia's progress. Reading between the lines of academic achievements and physical development metrics, she recognized the ominous preparations for what lay ahead, mentions of cultural integration milestones, and preparation for adult social responsibilities that would have seemed innocuous before but now revealed their true purpose. A month passed with no contact through the encrypted phone. Eleanor maintained her outward routine while inwardly calculating, planning, preparing. She updated her will, consolidated her modest savings, quietly researched international legal assistance. Each night she held Olivia's fairy stone, channeling every ounce of protection and strength toward her distant daughter. 6 weeks after Dr. Malik's visit, as Eleanor was preparing for bed, the encrypted phone vibrated with a text message. Plan in motion. Be ready. May need to move quickly. Love you. The brief message sent Eleanor's heart racing. Whatever strategy Olivia had developed was now unfolding. She texted back a simple acknowledgement. Ready whenever you need me. Love you more. 2 more weeks passed in excruciating silence. Eleanor jumped at every phone call, scrutinized every passing car on her street, slept with the encrypted phone beside her pillow. The waiting gnawed at her nerves, but she maintained her careful facade of normalcy, knowing that any deviation might trigger reports to the sheik. Then, as Eleanor was leaving work one evening, the encrypted phone buzzed again. This time, the message was longer. Emergency extraction tomorrow. Complications arose. Dr. M arranging transport. Be home after 9 p.m. Prepare for immediate departure. Tell no one. Eleanor's hands trembled as she responded. We'll be ready. Stay safe. Whatever leverage Olivia had gathered, whatever plan she had constructed, something had clearly forced her hand. The carefully orchestrated strategy had given way to emergency measures. Eleanor drove home with her mind racing, mentally cataloging essential documents, medications, and items they would need for a rapid departure. At home, she moved with controlled urgency, packing a single bag with essentials while ensuring nothing appeared unusual to any watching eyes. She paid bills that would come due in her absence, arranged for a neighbor to water her few plants, composed a vague email to her supervisor about a family emergency. All the normal actions of someone preparing for an unexpected trip, nothing that would trigger suspicion. As night fell, Eleanor sat in her darkened living room, the packed bag by the door, the encrypted phone clutched in her hand, waiting for whatever form Olivia's rescue would take. The neighborhood gradually quieted as households settled into evening routines, televisions glowing behind curtained windows, occasional dog walkers passing under streetlights. At 9:30 p.m., a car turned onto her street, not the expected nondescript vehicle of a clandestine extraction, but a sleek black luxury sedan with diplomatic plates. It stopped directly in front of her house. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs as the rear door opened. A figure emerged. Not Olivia, but Dr. Malik, her elegant silhouette unmistakable even in the dim streetlight. She moved swiftly up the walkway to Eleanor's door. Eleanor opened the door before she could knock. Where is she? Dr. Malik's face was tight with tension. There's been a complication. Khalid discovered some of the evidence Olivia had gathered. She had to accelerate her plan before she was ready. I've helped her leave the compound, but we need to move quickly. She's waiting at a secure location. Let me get my bag, Eleanor said, turning to retrieve it from beside the door. There's something else you should know, Dr. Malik said, following her inside. Olivia had to make certain compromises to secure her freedom. My brother doesn't surrender what he considers his without extracting a price. Eleanor froze, her hand on the bag's strap. What kind of price? Information, Dr. Malik replied carefully. Access to certain business connections. An agreement not to expose specific dealings. Olivia negotiated skillfully, but you should be prepared. She's not returning as the same girl who left. She's had to grow up very quickly. She's still my daughter, Eleanor said firmly, hefting the bag. Whatever she had to do to survive, to escape, we'll face it together. Dr. Malik nodded, a hint of respect in her expression. Then we should go. My brother's influence is extensive, but even he needs time to mobilize resources. We have perhaps a 12-hour window before he can deploy people to intercept us. As they moved toward the door, Eleanor paused, looking back at the small home she had created during Olivia's absence. Will we be able to return? Eventually, perhaps, Dr. Malik said, but not soon. Khalid doesn't forgive what he perceives as betrayal. You should be prepared for a significant period away from here. Eleanor nodded, taking one last look before closing the door on this chapter of their lives. Whatever came next, reunion, adjustment, rebuilding. The only thing that mattered was that Olivia would be free from the fate that had been planned for her without her knowledge or consent. As they settled into the back of the diplomatic sedan, Eleanor asked the question that had been burning in her mind since Dr. Malik's arrival. How did she do it? How did a 16-year-old girl outmaneuver a powerful man like your brother? Dr. Malik's lips curved in a small, tight smile. Olivia discovered something about Khalid that most people miss. For all his wealth and influence, he has one significant blind spot. He consistently underestimates those he considers beneath him: women, children, servants. Olivia used that against him masterfully. And you? Eleanor asked. What will happen to you after this? The doctor's smile faded. I've made my own arrangements. After delivering you to Olivia, I'll be taking an extended research position in London. Khalid's reach is long, but even he must respect certain international boundaries and professional relationships. As the car merged onto the highway, heading toward an uncertain future and a long-awaited reunion, Eleanor felt a complex mixture of emotions. Anticipation at seeing Olivia again, anxiety about the changes these years had wrought in both of them, anger at the deception that had separated them, and a deep, abiding gratitude that somehow, against all odds, they had found a path back to each other. The long night drive stretched ahead, leading them toward Olivia and whatever new life awaited them on the other side of this ordeal. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Eleanor knew one thing with absolute certainty. They would face them together, as they should have been all along. The sedan pulled into a private airfield outside Detroit shortly after midnight. A small executive jet waited on the tarmac, its engines already humming in preparation for immediate departure. Eleanor followed Dr. Malik across the concrete expanse, her heart pounding with each step closer to the aircraft. At the foot of the boarding stairs, Dr. Malik turned to her. Olivia is waiting inside. I'll give you privacy for your reunion, but we must depart within 20 minutes. My brother's resources are substantial, and his reach extends even here. Eleanor nodded mutely, her throat too tight for words. She climbed the stairs on unsteady legs, paused at the cabin door to take a steadying breath, then stepped inside. The jet's interior was luxuriously appointed, with leather seating and polished wood accents. But Eleanor saw none of it. Her focus locked entirely on the young woman standing at the far end of the cabin. For a moment, Eleanor didn't recognize her own daughter. At nearly 16, Olivia had grown several inches taller, her childish roundness replaced by the elegant lines of emerging adulthood. Her dark hair, once kept in a practical ponytail, now fell in sleek waves past her shoulders. She wore a conservative but clearly expensive outfit, tailored trousers and a silk blouse that emphasized her poised posture. But it was her eyes that had changed the most. Still the same dark shade Eleanor remembered, but now holding a depth and watchfulness that spoke of experiences far beyond her years. "Mom," Olivia said, her voice lower and more controlled than the child who had left Detroit 3 years earlier. The single word broke the spell of strangeness. Eleanor crossed the cabin in 3 quick steps and pulled her daughter into her arms. For a terrifying moment, Olivia remained stiff in her embrace, and Eleanor feared that too much had changed, that too much distance had grown between them. Then, with a small sound somewhere between a sigh and a sob, Olivia melted into the hug, her arms wrapping tightly around Eleanor's waist. "I knew you'd come," Olivia whispered against her shoulder. "I never doubted it." They stood locked in embrace as the cabin door closed and the jet began to taxi. Only when the aircraft accelerated for takeoff did they finally separate enough to take seats, their hands still firmly clasped between them. "Where are we going?" Eleanor asked, realizing she had been so focused on the reunion that she hadn't questioned their destination. "London for now," Olivia replied. "Dr. Malik has arranged temporary accommodations through her medical connections. We'll decide our next steps once we're safely out of the sheik's immediate reach." The confidence with which she outlined these plans, the adult pragmatism in her young voice, sent a pang through Eleanor's heart. The 13-year-old she had sent away would have looked to her mother for such decisions. This almost 16-year-old spoke with the self-assurance of someone accustomed to navigating complex situations on her own. "Olivia," Eleanor began carefully, "Dr. Malik told me some of what happened, about the sheik's true intentions, but I need to hear it from you. What did they do to you?" Olivia's expression shuddered slightly, a careful mask sliding into place. "It's complicated, Mom, and not all of it is what you might be thinking. I'm thinking that I sent my child to a man who planned to make her his wife," Eleanor said, unable to keep the anguish from her voice. "I'm thinking that I failed to protect you in the most fundamental way a mother can." "You didn't know," Olivia said firmly. "None of this is your fault. Harmon deliberately misled us both. and the sheik is expert at getting what he wants through whatever means necessary. She squeezed Eleanor's hand. But I need you to understand something important. I was never harmed physically. And what happened is more complex than just a man trying to acquire a young bride. Eleanor studied her daughter's face, searching for signs of trauma or distress beneath the composed exterior. Tell me, then. I need to understand. Olivia nodded, seeming to gather her thoughts. The first year was exactly as they described: education, cultural immersion, language training. I was treated like a privileged ward, given every material comfort and educational opportunity. I truly believed I was there to be a companion to Amira, who couldn't have children of her own. She paused, her gaze drifting to the window where the lights of Detroit were receding beneath them. Things changed during the second year. My Arabic improved faster than they expected, and I began to understand conversations not meant for my ears. That's when I first discovered that the sheik intended me to become his fourth wife when I turned 16. Eleanor flinched at the confirmation, but Olivia continued in the same measured tone. I was terrified at first, but I knew panic wouldn't help. I needed information and allies. I began watching more carefully, listening more intently. I noticed that the sheik regularly brought me to business meetings, ostensibly to observe and learn, but increasingly to translate nuances that his regular interpreters missed. Her expression shifted subtly, a hint of pride breaking through the careful composure. That's when I realized something crucial. My value to him wasn't primarily as a wife. It was my mind, my facility with languages, my ability to recognize patterns in complex data. I began deliberately demonstrating these skills, making myself increasingly valuable in his business dealings. You were manipulating him, Eleanor said, a mixture of admiration and concern in her voice. I was surviving, Olivia corrected gently, and I was learning. The sheik's business empire spans multiple countries and industries. He operates in a complex web of international regulations, cultural expectations, and political alliances. I made myself essential to his navigation of that web. But he still intended to marry you. Olivia nodded. Yes, but that's where things became interesting. As my role in his business affairs grew more valuable, his perception of me shifted. I wasn't just a potential young bride chosen for her intelligence and malleability. I became an asset whose skills transcended the traditional role he had envisioned. She leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on an intensity that reminded Eleanor of the passionate child who had once explained complex mathematical concepts at the kitchen table. I began to understand the sheik in ways others didn't. He's not a monster, Mom. He's a product of his culture and position. A man accustomed to acquiring whatever he desires, whether objects, businesses, or people. His wives are essentially living symbols of his status and connections. That doesn't make it right, Eleanor said firmly. No, it doesn't, Olivia agreed. But understanding his perspective gave me leverage. I realized that what truly matters to him isn't possession but value. Specifically, the value others can bring to his ambitions. Olivia's explanation was interrupted as Dr. Malik entered the cabin, having given them privacy for their initial reunion. We've reached cruising altitude and have clearance for our flight path to London, she informed them, taking a seat across the aisle. No indication of pursuit yet, but we should use this time efficiently. Olivia nodded, her manner shifting subtly in the doctor's presence. More formal, more guarded. Dr. Malik was crucial to my escape, she told Eleanor. She risked her relationship with her brother and her position in Dubai to help me. The doctor waved away the acknowledgement. My brother crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. I may have been born into a culture with different perspectives on marriage and women's roles, but I am also a physician who took an oath to do no harm. Forcing a 16-year-old girl into marriage would have been harm, regardless of cultural context. Eleanor studied the woman who had served as her daughter's protector. Thank you isn't adequate, but it's all I have to offer. Your daughter did the difficult work herself, Dr. Malik replied. I merely created openings when I could. Olivia turned back to Eleanor, continuing her explanation. As I was saying, I made myself valuable to the sheik in ways that transcended his original intentions. I began subtly shaping his perception of me, not as a future wife, but as something potentially more valuable. A protégé who could extend his business influence into Western markets that remained partially closed to him due to cultural barriers. And he accepted this alternative? Eleanor asked skeptically. Not initially, Olivia admitted, which is why I needed insurance. During my attendance at his business meetings, I gathered information, details of transactions that operated in legal gray areas, connections to politically sensitive figures, strategies that might not withstand international scrutiny. Eleanor felt a chill at the calculated risk her young daughter had taken. You blackmailed one of the wealthiest men in the Middle East? I prefer to think of it as negotiating from a position of mutual understanding, Olivia replied with a slight smile that reminded Eleanor of the precocious child who had always found semantic workarounds for household rules. I never explicitly threatened him. I simply ensured he understood that my value as a business associate exceeded my value as a wife, and that attempting to force the latter role would jeopardize the former. Dr. Malik made a sound that might have been suppressed appreciation. Your daughter has a remarkable talent for understatement, Mrs. Wilson. What she's not telling you is that she orchestrated a situation where my brother essentially negotiated against himself, coming to believe that modifying his plans was his own strategic decision rather than a response to implicit pressure. Olivia shrugged slightly. The sheik respects strength and strategy. Direct confrontation would have failed. I needed him to see that his best interests aligned with my freedom. The final arrangement, Dr. Malik continued, involves Olivia providing consulting services to certain of my brother's legitimate business interests in exchange for her education at Oxford and financial compensation. All conducted remotely, of course, and with appropriate legal protections now that she's returning to Western jurisdiction. Eleanor tried to process what she was hearing. Her 16-year-old daughter had not only escaped a forced marriage but had negotiated a business arrangement with her would-be husband. This is extraordinary, she managed finally. It's survival, Olivia said simply. I did what was necessary with the tools I had available. My languages, my mathematical abilities, my pattern recognition, these were always my strengths. I just applied them to a situation I never expected to face. Eleanor felt simultaneously immense pride in her daughter's resilience and deep sorrow for the childhood that had been abruptly ended by her decision 3 years earlier. I'm so sorry, Olivia. If I had known. Don't, Olivia interrupted gently. We both made the best decisions we could with the information we had. Your cancer is in remission. I've received an education beyond anything available in Detroit and developed skills that will open doors neither of us could have imagined. We've both suffered, yes, but we've also gained. The mature perspective from a girl not yet 16 left Eleanor momentarily speechless. She studied her daughter's face, seeing both the child she had raised and the young woman who had forged herself in circumstances most adults couldn't navigate. What happens now? Eleanor asked finally. We rebuild, Olivia said simply. Dr. Malik has arranged temporary accommodations in London while we sort out more permanent arrangements. I have an interview with Oxford's Advanced Placement Program next month. The Sheik's financial settlement includes funding for my education as part of our agreement. And if he changes his mind? If he comes after you? Eleanor couldn't help but voice the fear that lingered despite their apparent escape. The insurance remains in place, Olivia said, her expression hardening slightly. I've arranged for certain information to be released automatically if anything happens to either of us. The Sheik understands this arrangement thoroughly. Dr. Malik nodded in confirmation. My brother is many things, but he is not foolish. The agreement Olivia negotiated benefits him sufficiently to make further pursuit counterproductive. His reputation and business interests are ultimately more valuable to him than possessing a reluctant young wife. As the jet soared across the Atlantic, Eleanor marveled at the transformation before her. The child she had sent away in desperation had returned as a formidable young woman who had faced impossible circumstances and not merely survived but somehow bent them to her advantage. I still don't understand why the Sheik chose you specifically, Eleanor said after a period of reflection. There must be many intelligent young girls from vulnerable families. Why go to such elaborate lengths to bring you to Dubai? Olivia and Dr. Malik exchanged a brief glance that suggested this question touched on something they had discussed previously. The initial selection wasn't as targeted as it might seem, Dr. Malik explained. My brother employs people like Harmon to identify potential candidates. Young girls with exceptional qualities from families facing significant hardships. Olivia's combination of linguistic talent, mathematical ability, and your medical situation made her a particularly attractive prospect. But there was something else, Olivia added quietly. Something I discovered only recently. The Sheikh's first wife, before Amira, was an American woman he met during his university years at Oxford. They had a daughter together, but both died in a car accident when the daughter was 12. Eleanor felt a chill. And you reminded him of her. Olivia nodded. There's a photograph in his private study. The resemblance is striking. I believe his interest in me began as a replacement for what he lost, though it evolved into something more complex over time. The revelation added another layer to the already extraordinary story, a powerful man's attempt to recapture a lost past through the acquisition of a girl who reminded him of his dead daughter, only to then transform that relationship into something else entirely. We should rest, Dr. Malik advised, checking her watch. We'll land in London in approximately 6 hours, and there will be much to arrange once we arrive. As the cabin lights dimmed for the overnight flight, Eleanor found herself unable to sleep. She watched Olivia, who had curled up in her seat with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to long international flights. Even in sleep, her daughter maintained a certain watchfulness, a readiness that spoke of years spent in an environment where letting one's guard down completely had not been an option. She's remarkable, Dr. Malik said softly from across the aisle, noticing Eleanor's vigil. In all my years of practice, I've never encountered a mind like hers. What she accomplished, outmaneuvering my brother, a man who has bent governments to his will, is nothing short of extraordinary. I sent her into that situation, Eleanor replied, the guilt still raw despite Olivia's absolution. A mother is supposed to protect her child, not sell her. You made an impossible choice in impossible circumstances, Dr. Malik said firmly. And consider this, had Olivia remained in Detroit, would her exceptional gifts have found expression? Would she have had access to the education that has honed her abilities? Would she have developed the strength and strategic thinking that ultimately secured her freedom? The questions hung in the air between them, uncomfortable but necessary. Eleanor had no answers that didn't tangle in contradictions. Grief for the normal childhood her daughter had lost, pride in the extraordinary young woman she had become, guilt for the decision that had set it all in motion, gratitude that both of them had survived to find their way back to each other. What will you do now? Eleanor asked the doctor. Won't you face consequences for helping us? Dr. Malik's expression remained composed, but something flickered in her eyes, a brief glimpse of the personal cost behind her professional demeanor. I've accepted a research position at Imperial College London. My medical credentials are internationally recognized, and there are certain lines even my brother cannot cross without significant repercussions. I will be careful, but I will also be free to build my own life away from his influence. The parallel to Olivia's situation, another woman negotiating her independence from the Sheikh's control, did not escape Eleanor's notice. You've risked everything to help my daughter. Perhaps, Dr. Malik acknowledged. Or perhaps I finally found the courage to help myself as well. London greeted them with characteristic gray skies and light rain. A car waited on the tarmac to transport them directly to a serviced apartment in Kensington that Dr. Malik had arranged through her medical connections. The efficiency of their movement from plane to secure accommodation spoke of careful planning and substantial resources, a reminder of the serious nature of their situation despite their apparent escape. The apartment was spacious and elegant, with 2 bedrooms, a fully equipped kitchen, and security features that Olivia immediately checked with practiced thoroughness. Eleanor watched in silent amazement as her daughter moved through the space, examining windows, testing locks, locating exits with the systematic precision of a security professional. Dr. Malik's contacts are thorough, Olivia concluded finally, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. This place is secure and unlikely to be connected to us through any traceable means. They spent the first day in a strange limbo of emotional reunion and practical arrangements. Olivia contacted previously established connections related to her Oxford application, using secure communication methods that Eleanor barely understood. Dr. Malik arranged for delivery of clothing and necessities, then departed for her own accommodations after ensuring they had multiple secure means of contact. By evening, exhaustion overcame them both. They ordered takeaway from a nearby Indian restaurant and sat at the apartment's dining table, the domesticity of the moment in stark contrast to the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them there. "I keep expecting to wake up," Eleanor admitted, watching her daughter methodically separate her curry from her rice in the same way she had done as a child. Some habits, at least, remained unchanged. "To find myself back in Detroit, still waiting, still hoping." Olivia looked up, her expression softening. "I know. I feel the same way. For 3 years, I've dreamed of being with you again, and now that it's happening, it doesn't quite feel real." "Tell me what happens next," Eleanor said. "Beyond the practicalities of Oxford applications and living arrangements, what do we do with everything that's happened? How do we move forward from here?" Olivia considered the question with the same thoughtful intensity she had always brought to complex problems. "I think we acknowledge that we're both changed by this experience. We don't try to pretend the past 3 years didn't happen or expect to resume exactly where we left off. We build something new that honors who we both are now." The maturity of the response brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. "When did you become so wise?" A shadow crossed Olivia's face. "When I had no choice but to understand the adults around me better than they understood themselves. When my survival depended on seeing the truth beneath the surface." She paused, vulnerability briefly replacing her composed demeanor. "I missed being a child, Mom. I missed having someone else carry the weight of decisions. I missed you." The simple admission broke through the remaining distance between them. Eleanor moved to her daughter's side, gathering her into an embrace that Olivia returned with fierce intensity. For several minutes, they held each other, bridging the years of separation with unspoken understanding. When they finally separated, Olivia wiped tears from her eyes with a gesture that reminded Eleanor powerfully of the 13-year-old who had boarded a plane to Dubai 3 years earlier. "I have an idea," Olivia said, her voice steadier. "Something I've been thinking about since I realized escape was possible." "What kind of idea?" "The Sheikh settlement includes substantial financial compensation for my consulting services. More money than we would need for my education and our living expenses." Olivia leaned forward, passion animating her features. "I want to establish a foundation to help girls in situations like mine, those with potential but limited opportunities due to financial circumstances or family crises." Eleanor felt a surge of pride. Despite everything she had endured, Olivia's instinct was to help others. "That sounds wonderful." The foundation would provide educational grants, healthcare assistance for families in medical crises, legal support to prevent exploitative arrangements. Olivia's eyes shone with conviction. "We could turn what happened to us into something that prevents others from facing the same impossible choices." "We," Eleanor repeated, caught by the inclusiveness of the pronoun. "Yes, we," Olivia confirmed. "I'd want you involved, your perspective as a medical professional, your experience, your compassion. We'd build it together." She hesitated briefly. "If you want that." The question beneath the question was clear. After everything that had happened, did Eleanor still want to be part of Olivia's future? Did she want to rebuild their relationship on new terms that acknowledged the extraordinary person her daughter had become? "More than anything," Eleanor assured her, "whatever you want to build, I want to be part of it." Olivia's smile, a genuine expression of joy that momentarily erased the careful composure of the past day, was answer enough. They were changed, both of them, by choices made in desperation and their consequences. But the core of their connection remained intact, a foundation on which to build a future neither of them could have imagined when they parted at Detroit Metropolitan Airport 3 years earlier. 6 months later, the offices of the Wilson Foundation occupied a modest space in a converted townhouse in London's Bloomsbury district, walking distance from the British Museum and several major universities. Eleanor stood in the reception area, watching as the final touches were added to the foundation's mission statement displayed on the wall. Supporting exceptional young women facing exceptional challenges. Breaking cycles of exploitation through education, healthcare, and advocacy. Olivia emerged from her office, now 17 and settled into her dual roles as Oxford student and foundation director. The past 6 months had softened some of the vigilant edges of her demeanor as security concerns gradually eased and no pursuit from the sheik materialized. Dr. Malik's assessment had proven correct. The agreement Olivia had negotiated appeared to be holding, the sheik evidently concluding that the benefits of compliance outweighed any satisfaction revenge might offer. "What do you think?" Olivia asked, surveying the completed space with critical attention to detail. "Professional enough to be taken seriously, but not so corporate that it feels impersonal?" "It's perfect," Eleanor assured her. "Just like the young woman who created it." Olivia rolled her eyes at the maternal pride, but her smile acknowledged the compliment. "We've already received 30 applications for the first round of educational grants. The selection committee meets next week to review them." Eleanor nodded, still amazed by how quickly Olivia had transformed concept into reality, leveraging connections and knowledge gained during her time in Dubai to navigate the complexities of establishing an international nonprofit. The foundation had already partnered with several women's organizations and educational institutions, creating a network of support for girls who might otherwise face impossible choices similar to their own. "Oh," Olivia added, checking her watch. "We should leave soon if we're going to meet Dr. Malik for dinner. She's bringing that lawyer she mentioned, the one who specializes in international children's rights. I think she'd be perfect for our legal advisory board." As they gathered their things to leave, Eleanor reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. The desperate decision made in a hospital room in Detroit, believing she was saving her daughter's life at the cost of separation. The years of worry and limited communication. The shocking revelation of the sheik's true intentions. Olivia's remarkable self-liberation through intelligence and strategic thinking. And now, this new life they were building together, turning trauma into purpose. Their story was far from the fairy tale ending of a child sold to a foreign sheik returning as a princess. It was messier, more complex, marked by genuine harm and complicated resilience. But it was also a story of redemption, not through magical intervention or unlikely coincidence, but through the determined application of human intelligence and courage against overwhelming odds. As they stepped out into the London evening, Olivia linked her arm through Eleanor's in a gesture both casual and profound. They walked together toward their future, forever changed by the past but no longer defined by it. A mother and daughter who had found their way back to each other against impossible odds. The price of desperation had been high, but the value of what they had reclaimed, their relationship, their freedom, their purpose, was beyond measure.